call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron set the agenda for November 4th, 2019 council meeting as presented. I have Paul, I have a seconder in Chris. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Just give me a second. Let's put that in. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. Do I have any? Seeing none, we shall move on. Public comments. This is an opportunity for anybody in the public to step up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and speak to anything that's on the agenda tonight. There's a 2-minute time limit, and if you're speak illy of my staff or council, I will shut you down. I think I said that right. Seeing nobody stepping up. It's my first one. Consent agenda. The Council Township of North Huron hereby adopt consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.3. And further, the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive consent items 5.1.4 to 5.3.8 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Trevor. Before I call it, is there anybody who wants to bring anything forward? I'm going to ask Donna if she doesn't mind. I caught her a little off guard here tonight, but I'd like her to speak to 5.3.3. For just an overview, Donna, of how that works, and if we end up with more.
We have less. So, thank you, Reeve Bailey. So he is referring to in your agenda packages, there is our 2020 OMPF allocation notice. And our OMPF is our unconditional grant payment, which we received from the province. And I don't know if you remember last year, it was quite late in coming, and so we were really, chomping at the bit to get our budget passed. So they promised as a result of that they would have these numbers out very early to us. So in the allocation notice, you can see that in 2020 we're getting $1,287,900. Which is down 71,000. If you look at the bottom there, we received $1,358,900 last year. So the structure of the grant is the same, but if you see under section A where they're explaining how they calculate it, there's a number of variables that go into each piece of the calculation. And a couple of those are the number of households and your assessment. So they've updated, actually, our number of households for 2020 has gone down slightly, and our assessment per household has gone up, which reflects the higher assessments that we're seeing on market value. So those two factors, and along with the rural circumstances grant component, we've seen a decrease in each of those components. But what they're advertising it to mean is that all the components are staying the same, the calculations are all staying the same. It's just that in updating our information, we're seeing a decrease. And there is wins in other municipalities, some are down a little bit and some are up. But and we don't have the transitional funding either. They refer to the transitional funding a couple of times in that letter. And North Huron hasn't had the transitional funding for quite some time. So it is going to be hard to start the budget knowing we're going to be $71,000 down. But as I said, that at least we know we have the information in good time this year, so we can plan for it. And at least as we can make our arrangements as we look through the budget.
Thank you very much, Donna. Anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead first, Kevin, then Paul.
Through you, Rick. How often do they update the numbers of households, since we're adding some?
They update the data inputs yearly.
Yes, through you, Reeve. I was just wondering, are we going to be guaranteed that 2021 that there will be umph again, or is it?
Well, I can't speak for the provincial government, but they have not, we've been very fortunate to receive this funding, and they haven't there certainly hasn't been any indications that that it's going to be taken away. It's just that it's going to steadily decrease over the next, I think it's the total of 5 years. Or this was the first of 5 years.
So I guess we're all hoping that they come up with something else to fill that little slot. 5.3.7, I just want to touch on it too. I want to thank the Honorable Mrs. Scott for reaching out to us. I've had our second meeting with them. Dwayne, myself, and a couple of people from the theater were down, and she is kind enough to send us a letter thank you. And Lisa Thompson was there in support of us too, and I thought that was great for a busy schedule like she has to take the time to support us at this meeting and create another meeting with another minister later. So we all are working as a council. People are listening to us. We are reaching out to them, and I believe this council is making a difference. When we get letters back like this, I think it's a great thing instead of just thin air. So with that being said, all in favor? Carries. Public meetings and hearings and delegations. Tyler Johnson, Huron Shores ATV Club, request to allow ATVs on municipally owned land. Tyler,
Yes, sir.
would you like to come and speak to that?
Sure. Where would you like me?
Just right here at the podium, my friend. Or at the chair,
Where are we?
whichever
Right
you
here?
prefer.
Okay.
You can have it there if you want to, like Tyler.
Sure.
Fire guys, eh?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for giving us the time today to discuss this issue. So, my name is Tyler Johnson. I'm a director for the Huron Shores ATV Club, and I'm on the Trail Directors Board. I've been an avid ATVer since I was 12 years old on my parents' home property, and I've loved ATVing ever since. I grew up over by Blueville. I've played hockey in this town. This is my home. So HSATV is associated with the Eastern Ontario Trail Alliance and have been an incorporated ATV club since April 2000. We have over 200 members, guests, and friends to do with our ATV club. So over the years, we've created and managed trails that stretch from Whitechurch, Clifford, Port Elgin, to Paisley, and up to Beta Door, which is up by Bruce Power. With this, requires trail maintenance, signage, trimming of trails, and alleviating hazards, and a management program for our riders. We have a liability policy in place for our ATV trails. We have $15 million liability on our trails. We invest approximately $15,000 to $20,000 per year back into our trail system. What our club is looking for is a use agreement for ATVs to enter the town of Wingham for the purpose of food and fuel, and for our riders living locally in Wingham to have the ability to drive to the trail directly from their homes. Currently, riders coming from Port Elgin, Walkerton, Mildmay, Paisley, etc. to our parking lot located on the map that I had shown you, that I had sent. There's no authorized place for food and fuel at this end of the trail. So if ATVers don't come packing fuel on the back of their quads, then makes it tough for them at this end of the trail. So we as an ATV club would sign an approved road route for users to use to get in and out of town while minimizing traffic impact as much as possible. I had sent that proposed route as well. Currently we have road use agreements with Mildmay, Walkerton, Paisley, Port Elgin, etc. And they have been proven to work effectively for our riders without more disruption than necessary. Vendors and shops notice ATV riders as potential customers and are happy to serve them. With an approved signed ATV route, our maps can be updated to show new destinations and promote the town of Wingham and their shops. These routes are labeled clearly for ATV use, and many riders adhere to these requested routes. We as a club educate our riders that our trails are a privilege and not a right, and they shall be treated as such. Speed limits within town limits, as a provincial bylaw, have always been 20 kilometers an hour. Typically, we would sign an approved road route with arrows indicating to and from the trail. So it's just a straight in and out of town to get food to get fuel. We have prepared a potential route for the riders to enter and exit Lingham. The trail directors and the council with Huron Shores ATV, we come up with what we thought was gonna be the least impactful to traffic and to residential environments. So I've got the approval on the letter that I sent to Carson, and we can discuss that towards the end here, if need be. So the idea with the routing would give us, we would come down to Josephine Street from Scott Street, which is by the Godfathers. This would give riders access to Frosty Queen, Pioneer Gas, Tim Hortons, and the vendor shops. We would stay off of the main street here in town, and just because all the amenities are down at that end of the town, we would stay towards that area. So the intention of this route approval would be to stay off Josephine Street and to use only when required. Riders are aware to use hand signals when operating on public roads, and this will be reiterated to our club members. The HSATV Club is in partnership with the Bruce County Trails Department through Andrew Bulmer. Andrew has an excellent working relationship with the club and would be a suitable reference for the club's reputation in regards to trail maintenance and upkeep. And there again, I just want to appreciate your time, consideration, and understanding of this matter, and we look forward to building a successful relationship with you guys. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Tyler. Any questions or concerns or comments for Tyler? Go ahead, Rick.
Is your track in, the route in rather, does it mirror the snowmobile routes? Because I know they come in. And what agreement do we have with snowmobile clubs? Is this something that we can sort of work together, not work together, but have them equal?
You know, having said that, Chris, I'm just wondering if maybe council would like to make a motion to the effect of accepting this for information, allowing staff to research and investigate that type of stuff, because I think it's a bigger, broader conversation than what we can have tonight as a council without information. Would somebody be interested in passing a motion like that? Okay, go ahead.
That's true. Just noticing the differences between the seasons and the different clubs. I meant commend you on the presentation. I'm just curious as to the enforcement of the bylaw or street highway traffic act deviation. I've always seen most club members are very good at adhering to that. It's always the ones that aren't the member of the club that sees the trails and take off and go. I know we have trouble with that in my ward as far as snowmobiles go. It's almost impossible to police because by the time you're there, or they're out of town. By the time the police get there, the snowmobile is chasing in the wintertime. It's too late. So I just wondered how you mentioned a couple of things about how putting bylaws in place for your riders. Who enforces the non-club member when using your trails?
So basically, for our trails, because a lot of them are on approved county forest and some of it's on private property as well as railway beds, we have trail wardens that enforce that riders must carry a permit and must have valid insurance and adhere to all the rules and regulations of ATV. Through our trail wardens, they're the ones who enforce rules of trespassing. So if an ATVer is not carrying one of our permits or a membership, it's considered trespassing, and they will be told that they need, there's only so much a trail warden can do, but they will be told that they can't be on the trail. As for roads, the roads are under the, like, we follow the Highway Traffic Act, there's a section in the Highway Traffic Act for ATVs, what the legal obligations are of ATV riders, and when it comes to ATV use on the roads, that's, as much as we try and educate our riders as much as we can, there's nothing that we can really help to enforce other than to stay on permitted routes. I don't know if that answers your question, but
What are the visual standards for ATVs on paved highways?
so basically, the, under the Highway Traffic Act, depending on, there's certain highways that ATVs are not allowed on. ATVs are to use the shoulder at all times, where possible. If it is unsafe to do so, then they are allowed to go out onto the pavement. Anywhere on a highway that's 80 kilometers an hour, ATVs are permitted to go no faster than 50 kilometers an hour. Within residential settings or within town limits or areas designated at 50 kilometers an hour, ATVs are not to go faster than 20 kilometers an hour. So we travel much slower than the highway traffic, and when we come into town, we have to adhere to those rules, and every rider that rides an ATV is well aware of that.
Just one further one, this is to staff, do we currently have a bylaw or any statute in North Huron as far as ATVs or some of those?
I'll hand that over to you.
So through your worship, we do not have a bylaw right now, which means under the Highway Traffic Act, it defaults that no ATVs are allowed on municipally owned roads. So if we were looking to grant the request from the Huron Shores ATV Club, we would have to pass a bylaw regulating where they can be used on municipal roads and in what manner. But right now, since we don't have a bylaw, then it automatically defaults to no ATVs on any municipally owned roads. But in 2012, we were looking back into this a bit, and in 2012, there was a bylaw that was developed that came forward, and then ultimately, council decided to do away with it. So that's there for council's reference too, if
Has, has the local snowmobile clubs, they've been in place for many, many years. Have they come to council before and asked for this same provision?
through your worship, that's definitely something we could look into. I don't have the answer off the top of my head though.
Go ahead, Paul.
Through you, Reed. I commend you in your report very well. I see you come in through the back way there, and being that I go out on a bike quite often, that's really the ideal spot coming up Victoria Street on the Scott Street and across. And I'm not speaking ahead of time at all. I just want to say that I think the people could be very happy that you'd be able to come in. 20 kilometers an hour, I can go faster than that with my bike, so I know it's safe, eh? And so I think you have the right route coming into almost 20 kilometers
Good for you, Paul.
an hour. Almost, yeah. But definitely that is the best and safest. It gets you to your amenities the best. Very good work. Thank you.
So,
Just one
go
last,
ahead.
through you, good report. Again, not everybody comes to us, as full of knowledge as you have about your point, so that's good. I think you've given us, this is a good issue, and, look forward to the next step, and, if it goes that way. So, yeah, agree.
So do I have a mover for staff to investigate it? I have Rick, do I have a seconder? Anita, any more comments or concerns? Go ahead, Kevin.
Just wondering if through your report, are we just looking at the preferred route? Because I know in some past, they've tried to go to ask for ATVs to be permitted on all roads. If this is just the route, that doesn't pay any attention to the comment that he made about the access from people that are in town to be able to get to the road.
So on that, I will caution staff when they're looking at this, that we have hospitals and nursing homes We have small school children, so they will take that into consideration.
So if you see what I mean, like you're talking about.
No, I completely
On the trail,
understand.
That's not on that prescribed road.
No, I've got some, I don't have them with me, but I do have them available upon request. I've got copies of existing bylaws that are in place for Port Elgin, that clearly lays out the roads where ATVs are not allowed on. And it also puts a duration on timing, like it after, before curfew, like before 10 o'clock. They've also got, in their bylaw, they've got the speed limits and how, for instance, you're not allowed to drive by the funeral home, or you're not allowed to drive by the church, or all those things are laid out. It's been the most mature bylaw I've seen. I can send that along as well if that helps.
I'm gonna go to Anita first, she had her hand up, and then I'll come back to you, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the whole of North Huron, like, I don't know how the laws are in East Wellington, say if I go on the road with an ATV, is it allowed or not, or how does it work?
So you're suggesting to amend that to all of North Huron rather than just Wingham?
Yeah, if they can look into that, that would be,
I'm gonna have to.
if possible, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just switch it over here to Cars and see what he thinks on that.
Yeah, so through your worship, if that's the direction council wants us to take when we look into this and investigate it, we can certainly look into that option. Operationally, the one thing I'm thinking about right now would be the enforcement of that, right? So there would definitely have to be discussions with our bylaw enforcement officer as to what capacity he has to enforce these things right now. Because of course, we don't wanna overburden our bylaw.
No, but I was just wondering, how is it right now then,
So-
when we go with a bunch of friends on ATVs on road?
So if it's a township of North Huron municipally owned road, no
You're not
ATVs are permitted right now because we don't have a bylaw in place regulating them. So under the Highway Traffic Act, it defaults to no ATVs permitted.
Thank you.
I think I have to go over to Kevin first, then over to you, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
What's that?
Through you, Reeve, I understand that farmers can go from farm to farm at this point. But I know in Belgrade, we hear them leave, the kids are going anyways, they've got trails and, so that's what's happening there. Not that there's issues, but
So what would, go ahead.
Through your, what relationship and conversations have you had with the snowmobile trail people? Have you approached them as to using their system of trails?
So some of our, for an example, from where we have our railway bed from here on Bruce Road all the way down to Beta Door, that railway bed is also used for the OFSC. They also use the county bush that's closest to Wingham as part of their snowmobile trail in the wintertime, so we do have a relationship with them. Keep in mind though, that snowmobiles have, during the wintertime, have the opportunity to use farmers' fields where we have to adhere more to the roads than they do, because we don't have marked trails that go right through somebody's field, right? We have trails that go through county bush, we have signed approved road routes. Here in Kinloss as an example, I live over in Whitechurch, and where I live, people are allowed to run the main street in Whitechurch out to the ATV trail, and here in Kinloss has a bylaw in effect for ATVs to use their municipal roads. So for me, it's great, because I can get from my house, I can leave my house, I don't have the trailer, I can just go down the road and out of town, and I can get over to the parking lot, I can get over to our trail, and that works great. So I'm just kind of looking for the same support for our members here in Wingham as well, because we have a lot of members because of the trail access in Wingham right here in town.
Just to follow up through your, Dave, in Blytheboard, section of the snowmobile trail or the railroad tracks is in the wintertime used by the snowmobile club. but it's not used, or not supposed to be used during the summertime because it's a bicycle and for garbage to
Cheat
well,
sheet.
well, trail. If we were to implement that bylaw that anywhere in North Huron, that they would be allowed, I'm not sure how you could stipulate not being on a certain portion that people are walking and hiking and bicycling on. It would be disastrous to put a high-speed four-wheeler in that kind of a situation, that I should caution the latter part.
And I agree with you, Kevin, because we also have a high school, we don't want the high school kids doing it all the way up the streets with the smaller children in the hospitals and the nursing homes and the funeral homes. So yeah, so it's not going to be a free-for-all, we can let you know that right now.
And that's understood.
Yeah, Trevor wanted to speak now.
Yeah, I think at the minimum, we need to look at what the request is. At the very minimum, when staff comes back with a request or what this will look like, the minimum is that they're asking for the town to win. That's the minimum. How council determines what we offer as a motion to direct staff as to increasing whatever that looks like, that's up to us. But in my mind, the minimum is that, the minimum for us to ask staff is what the ATV club has asked for. They've asked for this, so they've asked for the town of William to look at it. If it's in the best interest of council to look at the rest of the municipality and how that deviates, staff are going to know from the conversations we've just had about the issues that we're concerned about. They're gonna have their own issues that we haven't even remotely thought about yet. Let's be clear, from a recreation perspective, from a public works perspective, I'm sure there's and even the trail committees that we have in the municipality, like, they're gonna have some concerns or issues around if they're in the same areas, the same trails. So I think, directing the staff about what we want to come back, I think is key, but I think at minimum, we want the staff to come back with the recommendation or a suggested route for what this actual club, because based on what I see, I don't have any concerns, but again, I'm not an ATVer, so, I think it's in the most important way to get staff to look at the overall review about what municipally owned roads is, because we could be talking about a municipally owned road, but it's not a municipally owned road, it's a trail, so it's not an actual road. So we gotta be careful about the terminology that's being used and how it's going to affect, one, the residents, two, visitors, and how people are going to be, and Carson's made an excellent point about bylaw enforcement, because at the end of the day, bylaw enforcement is by complaint driven only. So unless somebody makes a complaint, the bylaw enforcement officer is not gonna do anything. So, if there's 100 complaints, obviously that bylaw enforcement officer is gonna be very, very busy. So we need to understand what that looks like.
Any other questions or comments? Sorry, I jumped the gun on that one. I'm wondering if somebody could put a motion forward to, I think the proper thing to do, as Trevor said, is have staff look into it. It's just a matter, do you want to look at all of North Huron, or do you want to start with what is being asked here? But we know more. Go ahead, Chris.
Just what's being asked.
Okay? Okay, and Rick, you're seconding it?
So you already have the motion, so Rick is the mover and Anita was the
Oh, I
second.
do apologize.
What is
The council of the township of North Huron hereby accepts the delegation for information and directs staff to investigate and research the issue further, and that the amendment will be as it relates to the proposal by the Huron Shores ATV Club.
All in favor? Passes. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Thank you. I just have a quick question.
Yes.
This is mainly just so I can take something back to the ATV club. So when would the ATV club know whether a bylaw has passed or not? And if that happens, how long would it take? We're potentially looking at, obviously this ATV season ends November 30th. That's when our trails get handed over to the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs. So I was just wondering, what can I tell my directors on the board
So
when I
I
come
can
back
start,
to the meeting?
I could start by saying this would not be the highest thing on our agenda.
Mhm.
We have a very busy staff, but we have a very good staff. And they will look at this, and they will be in contact with you folks, and it'd be great if you sent the Port Elgin information in to move things along. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to my CAO, and he may have a more definitive answer, but I do believe it would be in the matter of how it comes down the chute. Dwayne?
Thanks, Reeve. So essentially, I mean, we'll do our research and do a report back to council. And then council will give us direction in terms of whether you wish to proceed or not. And if they do wish to proceed, then staff would then bring back a bylaw. And then council would consider that. So in terms of timing, we have another meeting in November, and then we're into December. So I mean, the earliest I see would be like by the end of the year, perhaps. I don't see anything before the end of the year at this point,
Okay.
but
So is that it, does that become a meeting, like, does that become an agenda item on meeting minutes or anything like that? I'm just curious, right? I don't know the process here, so.
Carson's gonna answer those questions.
Yes, so through your worship, so that staff report that would come back with the information from council, we would see that as an agenda item on our agenda. And so we would outline the available options and the research that was done, and council would consider it. They would look into whether it's something they want to pursue going forward, and then at that stage, a draft bylaw would come back for their consideration, and then ultimately, if they are continued down that path, then it would have approval at the meeting after that.
So we'll notify him as we go. We'll be notified.
Yep, so Tyler has my email, so we can definitely stay in touch, and if there's a time where you wanna reach out to see where things are at, then I'd be happy to provide you with an update.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Okay.
Penalties years.
Pardon me? Thank you very much.
Reports from the clerk's department, 7.1.1. David Clark, CEMC, Emergency Manager, County of Huron, I almost said North Huron.
It is North Huron as well.
Maury Huron County Municipal Assistance Agreement. Would you like to come and speak to that?
Reeve, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to bring this forward. I am the emergency manager for the county as well as North Huron as well. So the previous, as you've all got my report, the previous mutual assistance agreement that's in place was a little big, and this new version is much more comprehensive and reflects similar agreements that are in effect in other jurisdictions, as well as I believe it's already in effect in Grey County as well. And what it does is it spells out protections for both assisting and assisted municipalities for the employees, for the equipment, doing safe work as well as liability, and it really speaks to the nuts and bolts of an agreement. That you'll provide that if a municipality reaches out to its neighbor for assistance, that assistance, if it's available, is provided, that any equipment is delivered in good working order and returned the same, that employees that come to operate that equipment or other municipal employees that are being sent in to assist, for example, if we required additional building inspectors, or additional dump trucks or heavy equipment from another municipality, they would come with operators. And they would operate safely and violently, would not be making them do any unsafe work. And at the end of the emergency, then it's an opportunity for the assisting municipality to send an invoice to the assisted municipality for reimbursement. And it's only direct and indirect costs of salaries, not things like benefits, but just salaries for the people and overtime and shift premiums while they're here. And it really speaks to the nuts and bolts of it. The previous agreement just said that if someone reaches out, yeah, you'll help if you're able. But you really get into that. This provides liability protections for both assisting and assisted municipalities. And I think it's a much more comprehensive document that will serve all municipalities within Huron County. So my recommendation would be that municipalities adopt it and then rescind the previous bylaw. And I accept any questions you may have about it.
Thank you, David. Has anybody got questions for David? Go ahead, Ken.
Through your, Dave, does any portion of this agreement, how would I say, supersede any mutual aid or automatic aid that the emergency services have?
It actually speaks to it in one paragraph in here that says this does not apply to mutual aid. Mutual aid is emergency service to, that'd be like fire to fire, police, and EMS. They all work under mutual aid, so there's no need for that. This is things like in public works. It could be additional personnel. If we had an emergency where we needed additional people to man phones, additional clerical staff, we call on our neighbors to bring some people if they have them available, can spare them for a week or so, come in and provide that assistance to fill the gap, so to speak. But does not touch fire, police.
Any other questions for Dave? Go ahead, Travis.
Does this require the municipality that's requesting the aid to declare an emergency? So if the municipality has not declared an emergency, can they still request mutual assistance?
That's a good question. The reasons for declaring emergency, and there's a long list of them that assist the head of council in making that decision. I always break it down to the big three. Is it beyond the resource capability of this? Is there likely going to be an evacuation, and is it going to get a lot of media attention? Those are the big three that I usually say, advise a reeve or a head of council that maybe you want to consider declaring an emergency. The plan states that you may implement your plan without a declaration, in whole or in part. But I think if it gets beyond your resource capability of the municipality, then you're into a declaration. So I think the point really would be moot because you would be declaring if you need additional assistance. It does not preclude, I don't think, a CAO from requesting other CA for some assistance. So I guess I'm thinking this through as you asked me the question, and I would say probably not. It probably wouldn't preclude that.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up was, this really mutual assistance agreement is really based on the fact that you have an emergency issue that you need. It's not, you're not calling your neighbor because you need the snow route plowed or whatever. This is a need for absolute emergency service that you aren't able to support on a long-term sustainability.
In an emergency, they say that if it goes beyond the resource capability of within the municipality, you immediately first call on your neighbors. You may call on some private contractors that you have locally to send in equipment and personnel, or you're going to call on your neighboring municipalities for assistance. And it actually speaks to the fact that if 3 or more municipalities are affected by the same emergency, then the county will activate and coordinate the distribution of all that assistance, which is what is written in the emergency plan anyway.
Thank you, Dave.
Anyone else? Any questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, I'll read the motion. That the council of the township of North Huron hereby receives a report from David Clark, CEMC Emergency Manager, Huron, County of Huron, regarding the Huron County Mutual Assistance Agreements. And further, the council direct the clerk to prepare a bylaw for the November 18, 2019 meeting to adopt the new municipal mutual assistance agreement and repeal the previous agreement passed in 2007. Do I have a mover? I have Anita. And seconder is Paul. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, Dave. Monica. Okay. It's your first time up.
To speak and scoop. Thank you.
Monica's first going to speak to 7.1.2, the site plan agreement, the Rutledge Holding Limited. That says Rutland, but I believe it should be Rutledge.
I think they might have the name Rutland Holdings Limited as a company name.
Oh, really?
Yep, definitely. It's the Rutledge subdivision, but it's Rutland Holdings.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you kindly.
Thank
Monica,
you.
I'll let you speak to it first and then we'll have a motion.
Do I just hit down to start my presentation, or?
No, so yours are on the desktop, you just have to hit escape out of that
Okay,
presentation.
yeah. Thank you very much, Reed Bailey, and good evening, council. It's my pleasure to come and do my first presentation to you this evening. And this is a site plan. So in order to control development for residential that's beyond single detached or duplex or commercial development, the municipality has in its toolbox of planning tools, site plan control. So in order to ensure that the building is constructed according to the requirements of the zoning bylaw and represents good planning, they provide a site plan drawing, and there's an agreement that's entered into between the developer and the municipality. So this is a development for a fourplex in a new subdivision in Blythe. The plan of subdivision was given draft plan approval in May and obtained final approval by the county in February 2019. And this site plan proposes to construct one multiple attached dwelling on block 20 along Gloria Street. So it's a proposed 4-unit. The zoning is a residential medium density special zone. The relevant provision of the special zone is that it recognizes a minimum lot depth of 32 meters. In reviewing the site plan that was provided, it meets the requirements of the North Huron zoning bylaw. And just today, it was brought to my attention by the building official that there was one small detail missing from the site plan, which has now been corrected with a new plan that was provided today. So the plan that was first circulated with the date of October 9th was missing a fence or a planting strip along the north boundary, but a new updated drawing site plan has now been provided showing that requirement. So with that new change, this application for site plan meets all the requirements of the zoning bylaw, and there are no outstanding staff concerns. The slide that I have up now just shows for you the location of block 20 within the new subdivision and the proposed location for the development. And it's impossible to see all the details of the site plan, but this slide just gives you the basic idea of what the site plan looks like with a fourplex residential development. There'll be 4 units in this development with the garages abutting one another for two of the units. And this is the same design as one of the other fourplexes that has already been approved. So in reviewing this application, as I said, we reviewed it against the requirements of North Huron's zoning bylaw and reviewed it with staff, including the building official. And after identifying that one small change that was submitted today, this application for site plan does meet all the requirements and has no concerns. So it would be my recommendation that council approve the proposed development and that the township passes the necessary bylaw to enter into a site plan agreement with Rutling Holding Limited for the development of the subject lands.
So I'm gonna read the motion and we'll get a first and seconder and then we'll have questions and comments. That the council township of North Huron hereby approves the Rutling Holding Limited proposed development as it applies to 698 Gloria Street, Unit 1 through 4, Blythe Township, North Huron, Block 20, Rutledge Subdivision, registered plan number 22M-13. And further, the council approves the exception to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw, allowing for bylaw number 105-2019 to be adopted at the November 4th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a mover? Rick, do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Questions or comments for Monica? Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. We'll continue on to 7.1.3 site plan agreement with Auburn Gas Fire.
Wow, this is really slick. They're just all set up back to back the way I need them. Thank you very much. So this is the second site plan agreement for us tonight. In my experience, pretty rare to have 2 site plans in one night, but I'll take it. So this is another development that, because it is a commercial development, the site plan control bylaw would require, prior to the development being approved and going forward, that a plan be provided and an agreement be entered into. I know this property as the former Stickers Restaurant in Auburn, and I spoke to the new owner, and he has some plans to take out the existing pump that is there and provide 3 new pumps with a canopy. So that's the bulk of the proposed changes for this property. A new pylon sign will also be erected on the property. And other than that, the property is staying pretty much as is. So in reviewing this application, we reviewed it against the requirements of North Huron zoning bylaw. And the C1 Village Commercial Zone, the application does meet all the requirements. It has been reviewed by the staff and engineering for North Huron. This slide just shows the subject property. As you can see, there's the existing restaurant with the small gas pump out front. And in the grass area, there's an existing storage shed on the property. And this is a look at what the site plan looks like that was provided. So this site plan, together with the site plan agreement, constitutes what the developer is agreeing to do for this development. And in reviewing it, staff and planning have no concerns. And our recommendation would be that the necessary bylaw be passed to enter into an agreement with the numbered company 2665219 Ontario Limited for the development of the subject lands.
Thanks. So I will read the motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approve the proposed development as it applies to part of Lot 28, Concession 1, RP 22R2220, Parts 1 to 3, East Wallanosh, Auburn Township of North Huron, 38527 Blythe Road. And further, the council approve the exception to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw, allowing for bylaw number 106-2019 to be adopted at the November 4th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Paul and I have Anita seconding. Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. I see parts 1 and 2, and it says residential zone, but they own it. Do they have plans for that, or?
No, there are no new plans for the residential zone. So the development that is newly proposed really centers around the proposed gas canopy and the new pumps and the pylon sign. So they do have zoning on that portion of the property that is zoned residential, and I did talk to the owner of the property, and he did not indicate to me any plan for that portion of the property.
Say he does in the future, will there be any issues?
No, because that zoning would permit the construction of a house there.
And they're gonna maintain the restaurant?
I talked to him about the restaurant, because I was curious, because that's such a convenient location for a restaurant when you're on the road. He indicated to me that he doesn't have much experience in the restaurant portion of the business. His background is in gas station development and convenience stores. And that if he were to, I talked to him about, you should consider, if you are bringing the restaurant back, like consider hiring the old staff that work there, because they'll remember what it's like there. But he indicated to me that if they were going to do a restaurant there, it would likely be a chain restaurant. And I won't say the name of anything because I don't want the rumors to get started, but he was thinking more of a restaurant that typically would be associated with a gas station that you might see in some of the other towns around.
Franchise?
Yeah, franchise.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the question I have is, as it relates, Monica, as it relates to the site plan, because that site plan is the entire diagonal part,
Yes?
if he was to go, kind of borderline the same kind of question as Councillor Palmer, is if he wanted to develop a residential property on there, is he going to then have to be required to come back here because of it? Because he's only got site plan approval as it's directed on here. Nothing's been permitted for him, even though it's zoned. He's not permitted to build anything on that without, because no different than the one we just did.
Yes.
The site plan has not been, the actual site plan has not been approved by council. So if he wanted to build a house, he's gonna have to come back here to build it.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to go out onto a limb in answering it, but, you know, if I find that I'm incorrect, I'll correct myself later. Your site plan control bylaw will outline exactly what kinds of development are covered by site plan control and what kinds of development are not. And I have to admit that I haven't read your site plan control bylaw, and each municipality might have slightly different permutations in their site plan control bylaws. But typically, a site plan control bylaw will not cover single-family residential. So if it is explicitly excluded in your site plan control bylaw that a single detached residence is not covered by site plan, it's my opinion, based on experience, that he would not have to go for site plan control to construct a house in that R1 zone.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you. For this site plan to go through, is it not required to solicit the residential houses next to the site plan for their cares?
It's a good question,
and
too.
concerns with the higher traffic and lighting and pumps being moved and...
Great question. Site plan control is not subject to the same public meeting process as you may be familiar with a minor variance, a rezoning, official plan amendment. All of those other types of planning applications that I just mentioned have a legislative requirement for public notice, public meeting, and an appeal process associated with them. Site plan control does not have public meeting, does not have an appeal process associated with it. So to answer your question, no, we don't get involved in talking to neighbors to determine if the changes that are proposed are going to have a negative impact on them. The philosophy behind that is that once a property is zoned to permit a certain type of development, we've already taken those impacts into consideration through the zoning, and that site plan control merely deals with the technical details that would achieve the development. So once a property is permitted for a gas bar, then the impacts are built into that. And the way we address that is through the built-in requirements such as setbacks, and other mitigation measures that will be built into that zone.
Thank you, Monica. Any other questions or comments for Monica? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Oh wait, this was your first time come back. Somebody give her a hard time.
I know. Okay, give me a hard time next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 7.1.4, the 2020 schedule for regular council meetings. Maris, would you want to speak to that before we call the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as council's aware, the procedure bylaw guides North Huron's location, time, and notice requirements for meetings. And according to section 5.3 of our procedure bylaw, regular council meetings are to be held on the first and third Monday of every month. And then when a meeting falls on a statutory holiday, that meeting is held on the following Tuesday. So in the past, we've also scheduled around the large-scale municipal conferences. So as council will be familiar with, we sent around an email asking which conferences council is interested in. And we received comments back that there was interest in, from at least one councillor in attending all of those 4 major conferences, that being Roma, Okra, OSAM, and AMO. And so we've scheduled around those. And so the two that were conflicting were the AMO conference. So in our proposed schedule for the regular council meetings, what we did there is the similar approach to what we used for 2019, where we have one meeting in August. And this is with Roma in January. We used a similar approach where there's only one meeting in January. And the thing to point out there is that registration has opened for Roma, so if council is interested in that as one of their conferences, the steps would be to contact Mandy, and Mandy can get you registered for that. The one thing that Vicky nicely pointed out, so in the proposed schedule here, the one change is, so it says Monday, January 12th, so the Monday's actually January 13th, so that's the only change to be made there, but other than that, the schedule is largely the same as it was this year, except for only one meeting being held in January. And then I guess the other piece that Reeve Bailey thought would be worth mentioning is to have councilor representation at all four of those major conferences. So whether that's a discussion that that you guys want to have now, to make sure we can plan out to make sure we have representation at each conference and which councilors are interested in which conference kind of thing, or whether that's something you guys want to leave to a later date.
So I'll just touch on that a bit. There are the different ones, and none of us know what the other person's doing, but we all want to have representation in all of them, so that we can bring back reports to council, and also have an appearance there for finding your friend, shall we call it? So I'm not sure if you want to have that now, or if maybe Carson could send out the information and say, here's what everybody wanted. How would we like to go about this? Go ahead.
Earlier this year, it was sent out that we would send in what our preferences were. We never, I don't know who
Yeah.
did what, so I've already, sent in what I wanted.
Yeah.
I would like to attend this year, but I have no idea what I'm.
So that's where I was kind of going with that, that if we could send out the information
So-
who was going where.
Through your worship, no, I just didn't get a response back from everyone. So the one thing that we pulled from that was that there is interest in at least a councilor attending each of the conferences. And so the one coming up, I know Deputy Reeve Sype has said he's interested in attending that, but at this point, I don't have a full picture of who's interested in what.
So I'm gonna suggest for the next council meeting, we bring back all the where we should be going, and the names beside the ones they pick, and then we'll have an open discussion on who wants to fill in, if possible, if they can fill in, because we do have personal lives too. Would that, Kevin? would
Yeah,
that-
but the sooner I know, the better.
Yeah, I agree with you. So can we do that, Carson? Okay, go ahead, Paul.
So through you, Reeve, does it have to be January 13th? Like, the first week wouldn't work, is that what I'm reading here? For our regular council meeting?
Through your worship, so the reason we scheduled it a little later in the month is because things are picking up. They don't necessarily pick up right away after the holidays, so there wouldn't necessarily be enough content to have a fulsome agenda at that point.
So when is the deadline for the Roma again? Will we have another meeting before that? I'll go to that.
Yep, at this point, the registration is open now, and I imagine they're usually open close to the actual date. But yeah, we want to be proactive about it if everyone kind of sends me an email of what they're interested in, and then I can pull that together for the next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you haven't sent it back to them, if you wouldn't mind, I held off on mine to see where everybody else is going, because I'm pretty sure I know the two for sure I'm gonna be going to. But I thought I would fill in for other ones if we didn't have enough people going. So if we could get back to Carson on that, and at the very next meeting, let's have an open discussion about it. Okay? Go ahead.
Would it be a good idea for everybody to be thinking about rotating through this?
Yes.
Not like you have to do the same one every year.
I think from the Breeze point of view, there's two that I should be at.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
excluding you,
Yeah.
of course.
I always get left out, anyway. Oh, I'd be right on that one, then. Trevor, put it that way.
Well, you should be going opinion, you should be going to AMO, you should be going to Roma.
Yeah.
That's where you should go.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like we mentioned, there's certain things that, I'm speaking for myself, I cannot go to mostly anything other than Roma. It's during the summertime and during, around April 30th, you ain't gonna see me leaving the province at all, or even the municipality for that matter. So at the end of the day, I'm stuck, because of my job, I'm stuck into going into that conference, and that's kind of where I've been left to do that. I think it's a great idea if we can make it work that you can rotate or so you don't have to go to the same one every year. But I would suggest, even if you did, the content's not going to be the same. So even if you went to Roma every year, the content of Roma is not going to be the same every year, because one's going to depend on the government, and it's going to depend on the priorities of the government at the time to know what's going to be there.
Paul?
Being at the Ottawa one, there was at least five meetings going on at a time, you only can take one in, so there's four that you're not hitting, like, that's why I wanna go to the same one again, there's just so much there.
Go ahead.
Do we have a limit on the numbers?
Is there?
Through your worship, so it's a $2,500 per year, but I believe what council agreed to was that any money you didn't spend in that first year would transition over to the next year.
Okay, that's good, but I was thinking
People, you
of
meant
people.
Oh,
Yeah.
so the only numbers requirement we have is for the OSUM conference, we have representation on that, so we have to send 2 people. Other than that, you can send it.
Fair game.
Yep.
So let's bring that back to the table at the next meeting, let's get it sorted out, so Carson and Amanda can get things rolling. Sweet. So, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby received a report from the clerk dated November 4th, 2019 regarding the 2020 schedule for regular meetings of council. And further, that the proposed 2020 schedule be regular meetings of council be approved and posted subject to the required changes. Do I have a mover? I have Anita. Do I have a seconder? I have Chris. Any more comments or questions? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Now we're gonna go to 7.1.5, an update on the occupational health and safety policy statement and joint health and safety committee terms of reference. And I'll let Carson speak to that again before we ask for a mover.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this might be something that is new to council, so I'll just kind of go through the purpose of what the Occupational Health and Safety Policy Statement is for, and then also the Joint Health and Safety Committee itself. So under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as employers are required that employ more than 5 people, there's a requirement to prepare and review at least annually a written occupational health and safety policy statement, and to develop and maintain a program to implement that policy. And an occupational health and safety policy is a statement that basically speaks to the employer's commitment to the health and safety of their workers. And so, as I mentioned, this is something that gets reviewed annually. So our North Huron Joint Health and Safety Committee review it at the June meeting, and then it comes back with the suggested changes at the September meeting, and then upon their approval, it comes to council for adoption. And then, so that's the purpose of the health and safety policy statement. And then, so for the Joint Health and Safety Committee terms of reference, under the Health and Safety Act, workers and employers are required to share responsibility for safety. So the act requires that for municipalities with more than 20 workers, Joint Health and Safety Committee is required. And basically, this is an advisory body that helps recognize workplace risks and recommends solutions to department heads. And so North Huron has a minister's order to have a multi-site Joint Health and Safety Committee, which means that all our work sites are incorporated under one committee. And so similarly, the terms of reference for that committee are reviewed in June annually, and then they're brought back in September with those changes, and then they go to council for adoption. So as you'll see in the discussion section of the report, The health and safety policy statement, there was no suggested amendments to that. So that looks the same as what it is for the previous year. And then, so as for the terms of reference, there is a few suggested amendments to that we made, and that was largely because the Joint Health and Safety Committee's seen a lot of turnover recently, so basically we've incorporated more information in there wherever we can to provide clarity to the new members on the committee. So to just kind of quickly go through the changes, one is the role of the Health and Safety Coordinator. So as part of my role is the Clerk and Health and Safety Coordinator, so this is a new position. So how that plays into Joint Health and Safety, that's now outlined in the terms of reference as well. So the second one is the compensation of the Joint Health and Safety Committee. And basically what we've done is we've reworked the worker representation in order to make sure that we have department representation from each department on the committee. And then we've also put in place some alternates so that we can ensure that we have enough for quorum at each of our meetings. The third one is the monthly workplace inspections and department head responses. So basically here we just outline what the process is for workplace inspections, which includes stuff like when they're occurring, who's supposed to be responsible for them, what inspection form is used, and the requirement that the department head must respond to those inspection forms within 2 weeks. The fourth one is the process for recommendations to the Joint Health and Safety Committee. So whenever there's a recommendation for a safety concern, basically in the terms of reference, we've outlined that process now, which also includes the department head response. Fifth is our health and safety boards. So more clarity to the processes of who's responsible for updating them, where we have health and safety boards in North Huron, what materials are to be posted on those boards, and what buildings those boards are in. Then the final amendment is basically which buildings we're to inspect, and that's basically determined by the legislation of what's classified as a workplace. And so we've basically developed the chart in the terms of reference of all the buildings we're supposed to inspect.
Thank you, Carson. I'm going to read the motion, as long as it is, and then we'll ask for questions. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the clerk dated November 4th, 2019 regarding the updated occupational health and safety policy statement and joint health and safety committee terms of reference. And further, that the council approves the occupational health and safety policy statement and joint health and safety committee terms of reference as printed. And further, that council deems the signing of this bylaw, adopting this policy statement and terms of reference to be time-sensitive matter, and approves an exception to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 103-2019 to be passed at the November 4th, 2019 council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Ricky. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Do I have questions or comments? Go ahead, Anita.
The other childcare locations, do they have to be included or not?
I'm gonna hand it over to Carson.
Through your worship, so anywhere where we don't own the building, that's not our duty to inspect that. So another example, so right now, the ESTC building, technically it's owned by CalVel, so CalVel is responsible for inspecting that work site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kevin? You have a question?
Two questions. Yeah, first, as far as liability of the council, is there any, what I'm getting at is we don't get reports of safety concerns or anything to council. Is there any liability or due diligence to the council?
Carson?
Through your worship, so it's really a combined responsibility under the legislation. It's a collaborative effort between the management, the senior employers, and all the way down. Even the workers have a responsibility as well under the legislation. As to specific liability, and the reports gotta come forward. So the report, if there is a concern, the reports will come forward. So the other one that I can think of off the top of my head that came forward was the heat stress policy. So that came out of a concern. But other than that, nothing has really came to council because there hasn't been too many health and safety concerns. But anything that of that nature would definitely come to council.
Okay, just my concern was, if we don't see the deficiencies, we don't see whether they're rectified, and if that doesn't get rectified over a certain length of time, does that fall back on the council as far as the due diligence responsibility?
That would, through your worship, that would fall to the senior management. And like also all those deficiencies would come to the senior management team, and it would be their responsibility to ensure those deficiencies get corrected, because basically it's operational.
Second portion, obviously, you just mentioned at the end there that it's only buildings that we own. We're currently using the ESCC center. So they're not, the center is not being safety inspected, which is under the bylaws for the fire department.
So
that whole, are they not being still done, or?
So, through your worship, so that's actually a unique scenario, because one of the members on our joint health and safety committee, she's an employee at Cowbell, and she's a volunteer firefighter with North Huron. So because she's an employer for both, she's actually still inspecting that building monthly.
Because my concern was the employer, or the owner would not know the requirements for the fire service.
Yeah,
That's taken care of. Trevor?
Yeah, so just to comment on Councillor Faulkner's question is, we have to be careful with the discussion about operations. We are government, so any relating to operations, there's no liability to council because we aren't responsible for operating the municipality. So, prime example is the question I'm gonna ask. So, the question I'm asking, my question is, you say this occupational health and safety document is to be reviewed annually. And I have to be quite honest, I don't know that I've seen it in 4 years. So the question that we have as council is, under the legislation, it says it's supposed to be looked at every year. We as council would not know that. Otherwise we'd be getting into the domination of operation. The question that I have from a perspective, and I've asked this question from a council perspective versus staff, is how would council know when anybody states that under the legislation, this report should be filed annually or reviewed annually and council needs to approve it, that we haven't missed one? I guess the question is that how would we as council know that? We put a lot of emphasis and treatment as staff to make sure that you're telling us what we need and we're compliant. But I guess there's nowhere for us to be second guessing what hasn't come to us. Because like I said, the occupational health and safety one, you said in that report says should be reviewed annually. I'm like, okay, this must be the first annual time that I've seen it. And that's why when you told me when you review it, I went back to the agenda minutes to look to see if I ever, because again, I'm not gonna remember a year from, but this is honestly the first time I've ever seen this, so. And I was on the health and safety committee as a counselor, but we never talked about this actual policy. So to be quite honest with you, that's the concern, I think, from where Kevin, or Councilor Faulkner's question is that I would not suspect that we have any liability in knowing whether that report, if we were ever to get an administrative labor report issue, those things would come to us as deficiencies. We would get a report. If we had ever an audit that stated, here's the audit, here's the review, here's what we got. Otherwise, I guess the argument is council is going to go with no news is good news, because I think that's the only thing we can do. But that's the concern I think that I have had, especially, and I'm not, again, there's been a lot of turnover in the stuff in the discussion about here, but I think there has to be an understanding of where our responsibility stops and senior management's supposed to start, and how do we coordinate that communication to know that everything has been looked after, I guess.
So, would Dwayne or Carson like to address that?
So maybe Dwayne wants to speak to the piece that goes beyond health and safety of whether things are getting submitted or not, but as it speaks to this specific policy statement, So yes, that hasn't came to council in a long time. If you look at most of our health and safety program, it's out of date. And once again, Dwayne can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's why health and safety coordinator was incorporated into my title, because it's like senior management identified that as a concern of an area that we need improvement. So and what council will see in the future is the need to start with those policies. They're going to have to all start being replaced and updated, so that's something you'll consider in the future. But yeah, that's basically why that's incorporated into my role, is my understanding.
And I'm gonna get Dwayne to speak to it first, Trevor.
Well, no, I think Deputy Reeves-Sype has hit the nail on the head just in terms of there's been staff turnover and changeover, and with our health and safety committee, we've also similarly had turnover. And so we haven't had consistency in terms of our membership and in terms of our representation. So what Carson is doing is we're moving forward and we're doing an in-depth review of that health and safety committee. We do know that there are deficiencies in terms of some policies that we need to look at more closely, and Carson actually has been doing some research in terms of what are some options available to us to move that forward. So it's being worked on, and we want to, we're operating in a health and safety environment, but we just want to make sure we cross the T's and dot the I's.
I just want to follow up with something you said, Trevor, first, then I'll hand the time over to you. You said that there was a counselor on the health and safety. Who is our rep on the health and safety committee now?
So it used to be, there used to be somebody, a counselor could go, they were actually a representative. It used to be, what happened was, the Human Resources Committee was at the same time, which that committee has no longer, at least not that I'm aware of, is still even in existence. But it used to be the Human Resources Committee would meet, and then the Health and Safety Committee would meet right after, and the counselor who was at the Human Resources could stay for the Health and Safety one if they so choose. There was not a requirement, it was not a requirement at all. So, because most of that stuff was gonna come here anyways if there was ever an issue. So I think from an overall perspective, from the changeover in senior management that has happened, some of those committees the council hasn't been, because it was more operational, it's not necessarily a governance discussion at all. So I think it was just to save the idea that councilors don't need to be there, because they're really not, if anything's gonna change, it's gonna have to come to this council anyway, and one councilor's opinion isn't gonna matter at that meeting.
So I just wonder, having said what you said and what you brought up, is if I can just maybe ask Dwayne or again Carson, do you feel there should be from a employee standpoint of view, do you feel, and going back to the liability issue, do you feel there should be a counselor on, or I don't want to waste somebody's time, it's not needed, simply say it's not needed?
Yeah, so through your worship, so the kinds of things that do come to this committee, I don't think they would, there's necessarily the need for council representation, and the large scale things are what comes to this council, right? So a lot of the stuff that we deal with as a committee, it's stuff like, did the fire extinguisher in town hall get checked? Or should we put an extra sign at the landfill, that kind of thing, right, based on the accident reports that we get, which with North Huron are very minimal. But yeah, there's definitely not a need for as councilor to be at the committee, because anything that requires a policy to be in place or council consideration always comes to council anyways.
Thank you. Are you good with that, Dwayne? Or do you want to speak to that?
No, I think that Carson has, it's in terms of operational, in terms of inspections of the facilities, and so as Carson has indicated, the committee ensures that those inspections are being completed on a monthly basis, and that the fire extinguishers have been checked, and identifying any sort of hazards, in terms of, extension cords, for example, that, or things, making sure women's labels and all that sort of stuff, making sure that everything is up to date and current. As well as we have the boards, we have health and safety boards, making sure that the information that is posted and is available to staff is current and up to date. And that the proper PPE protective equipment, so if there's faulty equipment, you know that gets remedied ASAP.
Thank you very much. So Trevor brought up a few good things there, and I hope the counselors, I know you've been listening, I don't hope, I know you've been listening. Do we feel comfortable with what we've heard? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, the only thing I think is part of this is kind of one of the things that we've been talking about by every municipality, we are not new in this discussion. Every municipality has about 800 billion bylaws and policies. Let's be clear. I mean, the concern is that from a perspective of a counselor is which ones haven't ever been looked at, which ones were put in 1985 and have never been looked at again, and the conversation is that it's a revolving discussion about making sure our bylaws fit the needs of today. Because I will tell you, I know that just after Carson started, we repealed a bunch of bylaws that had no business even being in the municipality's bylaws at all anymore. So I think it's just making sure that we have, and I think our records management system is going to help a lot with this discussion, because I think, you know, the more things we have that can bring up to, like, you can look at every year and say, oh, well, this has to get looked at, as opposed to a memory game. It's going to be so much easier for counselors and staff to know that, yeah, we're going to get a report coming in March or April that's going to say we have to review these policies because it's a requirement. We know it's going to be there. So I think all of that is a work in process, but I just wanted to make sure that we were understanding of how this stuff comes to us, because again, we have 2 meetings a month, 26 meetings. There is no way we're going to remember what meeting we had a year ago. Not a chance. Unless your guys' memory is a whole lot better than mine. And last time I checked, I'm a lot younger than some of you.
He almost slipped there, didn't he? Okay, thank you, Trevor. Okay, in that case, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.1, 2020 water and sewer rates. Donna, could you speak to this one before we put the motion up there?
Yes, certainly, Reed. So I want to take a step back for a minute and just talk to you a little bit about the rates and fees. So our goal with rates and fees is to keep on track to get them passed on the path of getting them passed by January 1st of 2020. And then as we work through our budgets, we know what rates we're including in there. So already you've heard from different ones of the department heads at various meetings we've been having, talking about rates that they're going to be bringing forward to you for 2020. And most of them are fairly straightforward. However, we do need to have some discussions on water and sewer to make sure that we get those details ready to move forward. So we had an extensive presentation from BM Ross on September the 27th. And depending on what happens tonight, our plan is for next meeting is to bring a draft bylaw to you with all the new rates for 2020. We can have a good discussion there, and then we would have them passed in December. So we still have some time, and the opportunity for discussion is still available at each of those next 2 steps. But also, as outlined in that presentation, the rates are part of the financial plan, and the financial plan is part requirement for our drinking water license. So we have to have all that in place by December 24th, is what was outlined in our slides that we had on December 27th. So as I said, we are on track, and so we'll see how we get along tonight. So the presentation from BM Ross, again on September the 27th, they brought you 2 scenarios at that time. And I won't dwell on the percentages, but there was 7.2%, which he referred to as his minimum, and 9%, which was his ideal percentage. So those increases though were all rate-based, and none of that was on the reserve charge. And I know Trevor, you brought it up that day, as did I, because the importance of replacing our infrastructure is all we talk about these days with asset management. And so I asked BM Ross to go back and take a second look and prepare a blended rate that would have an increase on the rates, not as much as what was proposed before, but also incorporate an increase onto the capital reserve amount. So now the percentages look different than what you saw in your original slide. So now the percentage, again, I'll refer to the minimum, is 5.5% and the ideal is 7.1%. So these percentages would, once we decide where we're going with this, they would go in place and they would go up by each year of the term we pick. So with the revenues that we were looking for, I had two tables in my report. And so the revenue that's generated is still about the same, no matter what percentages, now the percentages are changed. It's still about the same amount of revenue. So I just want to go over that with you for a minute in the first table. So at the minimum percentage increase for water, and you can see that now it's a blend of additional revenue on rates and the capital reserve. So at the minimum, we would be looking at getting another $61,180.79 a year for water. And at the ideal percentage that he talked about, it would be $79,978. So the main point there is that the capital reserve would go up either $17,160 or $22,152. So that's under the minimum percentage we talked about. Minimum and the ideal. And then sewer, same thing. So if we looked at the minimum amount, then we would look at getting an additional $50,036 under the minimum scenario, with $16,500 going into reserve, and under the ideal solution, it would be $64,502 with $21,300 going into the capital. So then to kind of put that theory into what that actually means, the second table shows us that the impact on an average residential unit, and those residential units are the two slides that were attached to the presentation. And they've calculated out that the average person, average metered person, I'm talking about for Wingham, uses about 11 cubic meters per month. So we're gonna take a look at that slide and just see what that means. But in total, the minimum for both water and sewer would generate about would cost the person about $50 in Wingham and $63 in Blythe. And then the ideal solution for Wingham would generate about, or would cost the person $70 per year and $82 in Blythe. So if you look at the two slides, just to show you in perspective in actual dollars what that means. So the first slide that has 5.5%, as you can see right now, and the bills are bi-monthly, so I realize that does get a bit confusing. But on a monthly basis right now in Blythe, a person would be paying $92.28, and that includes the water and sewer capital reserve charge and the flat rate water and sewer. And then at the proposed rate, it would increase to $97.36 or $5.08 a month, which would translate to $60.96 a year. And so, as I said, he had said in the slides there, that would be about $63 a year. So we're showing $60.96 when you work it out onto an actual bill. And of course, for Blythe, that is flat rate. Now, when you come to Wingham, it's metered and everybody's a little bit different. So in Wingham, under the ideal solution, it would be about $50, and we'll look at the maximum amount, which adds up to be about 70. But under this minimum solution, currently in Wingham, based on 11 cubic meters, the bill would be $80.39 a month. And again, under the minimum solution, it would go up to $84.78 or $4.39 a month. And then that translates yearly to $52.68. So again, it's in line with what BM Ross had predicted there. So I want to go to the next slide, and then this one is what he referred to in his presentation as the ideal percentage. So this is now at 7.1%. So the same thing for Blythe. The current bill right now is $92.28. And it would go up to $98.83, so the monthly increase there is $6.55, or yearly $78.60. And again, that's for both water and sewer. The total would be $78.60. So again, in Wingham then, based on 11 cubic meters, the bill right now is $80.39. It would go to $86.11, so that's a monthly increase of $5.72, or a yearly increase of $68.64. So also, just for your interest, and you can look at this at another time, so not everyone uses only 11 cubic meters, so I did put another sample on your desks there tonight, again for Wingham metered. And so this particular property uses 36 cubic meters in a 2-month period, or 18 cubic meters monthly. So you can see then their increases would be slightly more than this. So their yearly increase at the maximum rate, this one, the first one I showed you there was $68.64, but this particular property would go up $74.52 because they use more water than the minimum used in the example. So I know that's a lot of information, and as I said, we need to make a decision what would be acceptable. Also in the report, the presentation and the slides that you saw, they were recommending a 10-year term. And again, in talking to our staff, we feel that it's very important to reevaluate after 5, because we just don't know. We have so many big projects and so many things going on that we feel it's important to. And we have in the past, we've adopted our rates for a 5-year term. Whatever percentage we've adopted, the rates go up by that percentage each year. It doesn't mean they go up once and then stay the same for the remaining years. They go up by that percentage each of the 5 years. So I just wanted to make that clear, that that's how that works. So if anyone would like to have any discussion, as I said, Andrew explained this in quite a bit of detail the day that he was here, but the only difference is that myself and other staff really felt we need to not have the increase just on the rates. It's important to increase the capital charge too, because it's so important that we have money being put away to replace our infrastructure. So that's the small difference, but as I said, it still generates the same overall dollars that he was talking about. It's just split into 2 pieces now, so.
So I think we're gonna have a discussion before I read out the motion, in case the motion changes. Go ahead, Gavin.
3 years. We assume that the new proposed rate would, the yearly increase on that 7.1 was about $78.60 a year increase.
On the flat rate for
On the flat
Blythe.
rate.
Mhm.
Are you saying that that's gonna go up there, that same amount every year for 5 years?
Yeah, it would go up each year.
So in 5 years, it's gonna be, instead of $78, we'll be paying $440 more?
Yeah, that's the way it would go up.
In 5 years, $440
Mhm.
on a 70 on. That's more than they're paying now, that's 4 times what they're paying now.
Yeah, so that's exactly right, so you would have, the rates would go up if you pick the 7% example, and then next year it would be 7% on that previous year, and then 7%. Yeah, so it compounds, it would compound each year, and it would go up, as I said, under the 7.1%, it would go up 7.1% each year.
I can't pay the one, the one that's $400.
But if you're only going up $10 a year, it's, forget the compounding, times 5 is $35.
No, you're going up
$78
$78 a year.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, that's $440 over 5 years.
Mhm.
The water.
And sewer,
Yes, sir.
yeah, water and sewer together.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, through you, Reed. Like, I'm not sure how it is today. Does it go up a percentage every year?
Yeah, so again, in the slides and such, that Andrew had presented, right now what happens is that we had a 5-year term, and we went up 3.5% each year. But, we didn't put the reserve up at all, so that's why his scenario to you, didn't blend the rates, and, so the rates were higher. What he showed you that day was 7.2 and 9, but it was all on the rates. So now when you split it amongst the rates and the reserve, it dropped the percentages slightly, but it doesn't change anything, it only changes the percentages. The dollars that the people would still be paying and the dollars we would be collecting is still the same amount, no matter what, which of the percentages you're talking about.
Go ahead, Kevin.
For the, so that, we get the billing 4 times a year,
You're billed bi-monthly.
bi-monthly, so 2
Yeah.
months a year. Just trying to see what kind of sticker shock that's gonna be on every month's bill.
$5.
Yeah,
Pardon me, but no, I mean, every, I don't know, it's $10, $12. By the time you get the bill, you're paying for more than 1 month.
yeah, so it'd be, about $13 on, for this year, cause yours would go up $6.55 a month, so it'd be $13.10 for each, 2-month billing, and then that total for the year is $78.60. And bought, and that's includes water and sewer.
That'll still be broken into the two, it would be separate, show stuff separate on the bill.
Yes, so it'll still show the water capital reserve separate from the sewer capital reserve, and the flat rate water separate from the flat rate sewer. So people will still be able to see, on a Blythe bill, there's 4 components of their bill. And you would still see each of those listed separately, and the cost of those.
Donna, can I ask, while everybody's thinking about something, can I ask, can somebody tell me why Blythe is not metered and Wingham is? Why that would have happened?
Yeah, so we've tried many years, it all boils down to same dollars. So, at amalgamation, Blythe wasn't metered and Wingham was. Wingham's been metered for years. And so we tried, there was several grants came out over the years, and we've applied to try to have Blythe metered, but we were never successful on getting a grant for Blythe to buy the water meters there. And I can't remember now off the top of my head how much the prices have changed on a residential meter, so I can't remember how much that total cost would be, but you're looking at some significant dollars to meter all of Blythe. The other thing I would just like to add too is, until 2009, when we completely overhauled the rates, there was so much revenue collected on the base rate and very little collected on the cubic meter, that it was almost hardly worthwhile reading the meters, because we were collecting all of our money on the base rate. So when we completely overhauled things, it made it fair. What we were looking for is more of a user pay, And so everybody paid on the base rate, which we have fixed costs that never go away, but then the large users would pay more, and the single person living by themselves would pay less. So that was all part of the whole overhaul, was to make it more of a user-pay system. But for Blythe, we've tried to get the money to meter them, and it's just never worked out.
So on our building permits, could we, moving forward, could we have that, you have to put a meter on a building as you build, no matter where you are in Northern? Well, it doesn't matter if East Wall or not, but whether it's the village or the town, that the new house should be metered? Is it worth, you said the metering really wasn't worth it, so,
No, well, the way the rates were, set, now we have them set properly, or we feel that they're more reflective, to generate more of our revenue off of the metered rate rather than getting all our money off the base rate. And I think, Sean, I don't wanna put you on the spot, but you are now having, all new installations then putting a meter on, is that
All-
correct?
All multi-res are being required to put in.
okay, no matter where they are, like Blythe,
Yeah.
okay, that's
That's
fair moving forward. Go ahead, Kevin.
Through your, on the BMOS findings at the end of the second page slides, they're talking about the funding for the water rate, or findings for the water rates, talking about the revenue percentages, back and forth. I think before, in my opinion, before a large increase in the water rates, some of these numbers here, I think we need to get in line a little better. Wayne residents, customers using 52% of the water, but contributing 78% of the revenue. I think they would want to know why. And the large consumers paying 37 cents, or 37%, and only contributing 16%. I know their water agreements going back 50 years, 60 years with some of the large users, but there's quite a bit of discrepancy here in our residential to what, they don't seem to balance, or don't seem to jive to me before we start asking every single ratepayer to put in for these discrepancies.
Yeah, so Donna, could we have a look at that?
Oh, for sure, and in my report, there is a paragraph on exactly that, but that will come, but it still isn't going to really, alleviate the rates, part of things. So it's a really big animal to look at that, these ICI, industrial, commercial, and institutional users. And so what happens there is, one of the main customers that would be affected there would be Westcast. So we'd have to do some calculations as to how much Westcast would be, and this is for the sewer portion on that. And then also there's like the hospitals and the school boards, and some of those aren't paying at 100% of their sewer based on water. So it's that piece of it is gonna take a lot of work to study it. We've already made some plans about how we would tackle that. So that's kind of like step 2 of this, but getting the rates in place, under the first slide that says key findings, to get your goals that your operating revenue and your operating expenses are equal. And then secondly, and then who's paying those operating expenses. So that's definitely another step, but as you can see, we have to make some movement on getting our operating revenue equal to our operating expenses. And then we have to work on our replacement and building reserves. So those were the goals of this whole next step. Yeah.
Do we know who is getting the other, or who's getting 20% or 26% of the residential customers? They use 52% of water, but they're contributing 78%, someone's getting 26% for free.
Well, it's if you look, the next one basically is the large customers. They use 37% of the water and only pay 16% of the revenue. So that's the biggest block that we need to look at for sure. It's not going to be politically, an easy discussion on that by any means, but that's definitely our next step.
So do we, if you don't mind me speaking on council, can we put a timeline on that? Because I think we had this discussion 8 years ago when I was on council, so can we put a bit of a timeline on when we're going to look at sewer versus water? You said it was going to take quite a while.
For these industrial, whole industrial, issue is definitely gonna take some while, but we can't hold up the rates until that's done.
Okay.
We've gotta get these rates, some sort of rates put in place by December the 24th, for sure, to move forward.
So maybe the council's just not, by the sounds of it, not just too happy with maybe going to 10 or to 5, maybe a little less till we have time to think about it. Think about that, council, while I draw another question. Here we go. So the Blythe citizens, not the Blythe, the Belgrave citizens we're subsidizing them because Morris Turnberry charges a lot more than we do to our customers. And we've had this conversation. The subsidization that we're giving them comes out of our water and sewer pocket, money pocket. Where does the citizens of North Huron get the money to pay down the Morris Turnberry rates?
So what we do is when we sit down and do the budget, you add up the expenses for the Wingham system, the Blythe system, and the Belgrave system. So you get your total expenses. And then we've set our rates, as I said, to make sure that we're moving towards collecting equal amounts of revenue and to offset the expenses. But over the years, the expenses for the Belgrave system, which happens on a very small system like that, you have very few people contributing to the cost. And so back in 2009, there wasn't a lot of variation between what our Blythe rates, our Blythe people were collecting or paying as to what Morris Turnberry was charging us. So at that time, council made the decision to charge everybody the same, and so in theory, the Blythe and Wingham water users were paying the difference. And so then, as the years have gone by, even though we've steadily increased our rates and increased our revenue, it hasn't kept up to the expenses, how high the expenses have gone on a small water system, which is quite typical in our area. So now, as I said, the difference is getting to the point where at least we have to have a discussion on it. And your options are to continue to bill the Belgrave users the same as Blythe, or charge the Belgrave users the same as what the Morris Turnberry users are paying, or something in between, closing the gap. But it takes us out of that, rate for the municipality. So that's what council needs to have a discussion on those three options and determine which of those options that you're willing to accept.
So we are discussing costing right now and the price of water and sewer, and all I'm suggesting is, here we go again, Morris Turnberry, I believe, is charging their ratepayers double what we, correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, than what we are collecting on the North Huron side. Therefore, the North Huron ratepayers are subsidizing the cost in Belgrade because Morris Turnberry controls the costing, not us. I think we have to have, I don't know how much money is involved, but I think this council has to have a very serious look at that. This is not you guys being the bad people. Morris Turnberry is charging us $2,000 a year, but we're subsidizing $1,000, and that's why you're in the picture and now, or it helps you get in the picture and now we're putting the price of everything up. Go ahead, Donna.
No, I was gonna say, so what Morris Turnberry does is the same as us. They sit down and figure out what is the budget for that system for the year, and divide it by the number of users, and that's $1,055. So they need that money in order to pay their bills to run that system. So they send us a bill for our number of users times $1,055. So we pay them that correct amount so that they have the money to run their system. But as I said, it was council in 2009 chose not to charge our ratepayers the full amount because we have 3 water systems and we could spread the costs out over all the systems and try to treat everybody the same. But what has happened over the years is that gap has grown, just because the expenses of the small water system have gone up. So right now, they charge us $1,055, which they charge to everyone. And our ratepayers are short by $423.36. So they're paying they're paying $631 per year. That's what we're billing them, which would be the same as the flat rate in Blythe. But yet Morris Turnberry needs $1,055.
So it's $423.
$423.
And how many services do how many services do they have?
I think there is 28, and then there's the park is seasonal. I don't know if there's another seasonal one there or not.
It's costing us about $10,000 to subsidize the water system for Belgrade because we're dealing with Morris Turnberry, and that's fine. I guess where I'm going with this is Morris Turnberry doesn't seem to have any problem charging the proper amount they need for their water system to keep their water system going. So if we have to put it up, it's because we have to put it up to keep our water system going. It's nothing any of us want to do. I'm gonna kind of side in with Kevin a bit. I'm not sure I'd want to do, I think we should maybe look at it a little more often. The way that came out to me, that was over the course of 4 or 5 years. Wait, yeah, and I'm not sure what we're getting for water rates for Allegheny cross-border servicing, whether we're subsidizing a bunch of other ones at the north end of Wingham or not. That we'll have to look into that. This is a tough one, guys. Go ahead, Anita.
I would like everybody just to have a look at the price of water. It's a cubic meter, like a desk full of water for 99 cents.
Yeah.
That is really cheap. That is, I don't know how the areas around us are, how Bristol is or Clinton, how much they charge for their water, but 99 cents for a cubic meter of water is really not much.
Especially when you go in a plastic bottle in a Ride store that everybody buys is $1.99 for a little plastic bottle, and yet.
Yeah.
So we're not gouged, nobody's getting gouged. If anything, we're suffering because we don't have the money to refurbish everything as it goes along. Paul, you're next.
Yes, I think we gotta look at this as user pay. I see what's happening in, well, Chris is an example there, he's getting charged what it's costing to do it. We're gonna have to adhere, the money's gonna have to come from somewhere, taxation another way. It's gotta be user pay or we're gonna be in trouble.
You're talking about Belgrade.
Oh, Belgrade definitely, the user pay, they pay that, but with us too, like, look, I'm getting my rates at less than half the price is what Belgrade's paying right now. So we've been getting a deal in Wayne. And Blythe, like, I mean, we gotta use common sense here.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's.
No, that's good. I'm gonna go to Trevor first, then Kevin.
So, the issue has always been, is that the rates have been going up constantly, but the rates for capital and the capital have not changed. It's been $15 for 5 years. And the fact of the matter is, it is getting more expensive to replace equipment, to replace the infrastructure of our water and sewer. And the issue is it's fine to put it in the rate, the operating rate, but then all you're doing is using that for operations. So if you have surpluses, which you're not supposed to have surplus, but if you happen to have surplus because of operations, you would think some of those operations would go into reserve. But you don't know from 1 year to the next whether you're gonna have a surplus or a deficit, so you kind of keep them in operations. The concern really for me is that always a goal has been the transparency part of where this money is going. When you see a reserve charge on your bill, you know as the municipality is putting that money away, not touching it, unless they need it for water or sewer or whatever water or sewer project, and that's what it's being used for. Operationally, if you put it in the base rate or whatever, we could be using it to pay wages, we could be using it to buy whatever to relate to the operations. It is, we have infrastructure deficit. Period. We have to make difficult decisions about making sure that the future of this municipality's water system is in the best hands it can be. And whether it's $400 in the next 5 years or it's not, at the end of the day, water and sewer, we have to ensure that we are operating a system that is safe, effective, and that when somebody turns on the tap, they're gonna get water, because it's a basic human need. So, I understand everybody looks at it from, yeah, there's $400 more in the next 5 years. Well, if you just look at what we just went from 5 years ago to what we just went to, it's went up 3.5% every year for 5 years. And people have, I'm not sure people have been excited about it, but it's all gone into the base rate. It's all gone into operations, where we haven't added anything to getting infrastructure up to this infrastructure issue. Because of user pay systems, it has to be that way. We can't use taxation, and we shouldn't be using taxation in order to do this. So we need to make the difficult decision of increasing funding, because if the water tower or whatever other issues are gonna be, these are gonna be big dollared items, period. They're not gonna be $25,000 issues, they're gonna be millions. So we need to make sure it's available, and we need to make sure it's there. Because I know, and I hate to say this because this is the way it is in municipal government. It isn't gonna matter if we put it up $1 or $400, somebody is gonna be upset. They're gonna be upset at it. That we're charging them too much. That is a perception, that is everybody's personal opinion about what rates are. We have to look at the rates as we see it, based on the financial plan and perspective where we see in the next 5 to 10 years, and we need to make it accordingly. And somebody wants to look at it and give us an answer about what we shouldn't do, feel free. Come on, give us an opinion, give us a suggestion. But we're not spending this type of money on BM Ross and that because we want to. We need to make sure the financial plan and the validity of the plan makes sense.
Go ahead, Kevin.
It would give the overall scheme some clarity, and to the ratepayers especially. We don't show cross-border, but it would go up. We're not showing other factors that are not in here. We just got Blythe and Wingham. Belgrade isn't in here in something that the public can see. If my math's right, in those 5 years that we've been going with that 7.1, our cross-borders, instead of us in Blythe, we paid $440. If that was to go up the same amount, in the 5 years, they'd be paying $1,100 more. Just compounded 10% every year. So I mean, that will go a long way in explaining who pays for what. And I'm not sure they're paying enough, so. That's what I'm just saying, it would be nice to have everything. I know we only have the two responsibilities, and one's just a payment to more term rate, but we have nothing in here that Blythe with Central Huron taking water, or nothing in here from, in here showing the rates that, and amounts or what it went up for Morris Turnbury to our north teams for infrastructure. It would be nice to see it in here so we know how much is theirs and how much is ours and
Yeah.
how much is others.
So we've run this around the table pretty good tonight, so here's the decision we have to make. We have to make a decision on which way to tell our staff to go. So, so the motion that's before me actually asks for that. So the motion that's before me says that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives the 2020 water and sewer rate report from the Director of Finance dated November 4th, 2019 for information purposes. We all agree with that. And further, the council provides direction to staff regarding the water and sewer rates. What direction do we want to give them? Donna?
Well, I was just gonna say, so step one is to choose one of the two scenarios on the rates, either the 5.5 or the 7.1, which Andrew had referred to as the minimum and the ideal, so that's step one.
Let's just stop right there and go with that, 5.5 or 7 point thoughts. Who would like to speak up? Go ahead, Trevor.
I think we have to do the, based on our infrastructure deficits and stuff that we have, I think we need to do the 7.1.
Anybody else want to speak?
You can pass that right there, so if Trevor makes an emotion, you can pass that part, and then if you want to move on to the step two, you make it a separate motion.
Okay,
Easiest way to do it.
so you have a motion there, Trevor?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a seconder? I believe I see Paul. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna hold off the vote. Chris, you wanted to say something, I
So
apologize.
that's just regarding the rates here, it's not touching Belgrade, it's not touching cross-border, so that will be a
Step two.
subsequent one?
Step two.
Fine.
So I call the vote then? Carries. Donna?
Okay, so then step two is harder in that is dealing with the Belgrave system. So I've given you three options here, and that is to continue to bill the same that we have, billing Belgrave and Goliath the same, or charging Belgrave users. We would have to increase them $35 a month to equal the $423 a year that we're short. And then monitor that each year, because I don't know how much the Belgrave bill is gonna go up each year, but it gives you some idea where what you just passed is looking at $60 or $70 a year. This is looking at $423 a year. So just to make sure that you're clear on that, or somewhere in between in a gap closing.
So the 423 is just the first year to bring it up to what it's cost, what
What
North
we,
Huron's
what's,
what Morris Chamber is charging their own ratepayers.
yes,
Okay, and then it wouldn't be a $400 every time.
no.
Okay, council, I throw it open. Go ahead, Trevor.
My suggestion would be is to phase in the cost increase to Belgrade ratepayers, take into consideration what the cost has been for the system over the last 5 years. Take into consideration that cost as being what the cost will increase over the next 5 years, and phase in the process by the time we get to the 5th year, they're now level with what they should have been paying. So their rates are going to go up. They're not going to go up the $35 a month. What I'm saying is, over the next 5 years, the gap right now is $400. The gap in 5 years could be $500 based on what they're billing us. What Morris Turnberry is charging for the whole usage of the system. So if we know if we can predict by estimating what we've already got over the last 5 years, Belgrade has been charged a cost, the units for what has been there. Know what that increase is going to be over the next 5. We already now know what the gap's going to be in 5 years. So take that gap and spread it out over the 5 years. So by the time the 5th year comes, they're at the level that they should have been now.
Or another way to put it is let's subsidize Morris Turnberry for 5 more years. Go ahead.
That's it. It's gonna be a tough one, because you can never be above what we're being charged there now. And I realize it does go up a bit. And this is the point, when you build a house, they give you a bill for $8,000, that was in the ground cost of doing the system. And now we're paid $1,000, we owe $1,000, pure operations, that's Viola. And as far as reserve, I'm not sure how that is working, it may be tickled in there. But anyways, we were charged, everybody was charged up front. So that's the point, but we cannot be above. I don't know, again, I think subsidizing them was a mistake a long time ago. It should have been just user pay, and I kind of wish it was, because now we're faced with 28 people being mad, saying, what the heck are you doing? I think it's easily explained, but if we were going to subsidize them, I wouldn't want it to be more than 2 years.
Carson wants to talk to us.
So I was just gonna, just so I'm capturing it properly in the minutes here, so if I'm understanding what Deputy Reeve is saying, so currently, say the North Huron side of Belgrave is being subsidized 50%, so in a 5-year period, the rest of North Huron would subsidize it 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%, until it's back to paying equal, is my understanding.
Paying for the full cost.
Yes, but understand that you don't know what that cost is going to be in 5 years. So you have to take into consideration what the inflation cost is going to be in that 5 years to get you, because if you just do what it is now, you're still gonna have a gap. You're still gonna be in a gap. So my thinking, and overall, when council did this before, they took it as a water system. They took it as a whole system. It's 3 separate systems. They're saying it's a whole system. North Huron ratepayers are paying for it. So Wingham's not paying for Wingham's system, Blythe isn't paying for Blythe's system, and East Wash isn't paying for their system. So the subsidy discussion isn't with Morris Turnberry, it's North Huron residents are subsidizing other North Huron residents for water. We're not subsidizing Morris Turnberry at all. Morris Turnberry is charging us what they need to charge us based on their rate system. So it's just the Belgrave and Wingham ratepayers are subsidizing that rate for the Belgrave unit because that's got to be in there because we treat it as one ginormous system. Even though there's 3 different people and 3 different size systems. So hopefully that's clearer, but the question ultimately is, do we want to go back to that philosophy where not all the ratepayers are paying the same? Or do you want to have each individual ratepayer having to bear their own cost for the system that they are in? That's ultimately what we're talking about here. Because it is going to be more expensive for people for the Wingham or the North Huron side of Belgrave, period. Because the system is small with low unit, low people. The percentage isn't going to be there. It's going to be high. Where the councils in history said, well, we got a big system, we got a big user base, let's spread that out and help those who make it more economical for them, while still making economical for Blythe and Wing. That's the reason they did it. My suggestion is that if we're going to phase it in, you need to phase it in a longer period of time. Because Belgrave residents aren't going to want this great big hat. I would not want to give them a big shot, because it's not fair, in essence of equitable and fair. But council needs to decide whether we're going to treat it as a system and use the same philosophy as the councils before, or treat that system as the Belgrave system is their system, and I'm sorry, Belgrave unit, or Belgrave, people, your water system's costing you a lot more. Sorry, it's not our part. Morris Turnberry's charging us, we have to charge you. That's ultimately the decision that has to be made.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Peter, I guess it's to staff, I guess. Does the ratepayers in the Belgrade, do they have a say in Morris Turnberry as to what the rates are?
No.
So they can set it to whatever they want. Do the ratepayers in Morris Turnberry have any say to our rates for cross-border?
No.
We can set them whatever we want. That's all I have a question. Who had say in what?
Go ahead, Don.
Like, your only say is that you do a budget for your water system, and that's what you take to your ratepayers. And it's the same, they do a budget for their water system, and we do a budget, we only on ours, as I said, you'll see, our budget does have the 3 components, but it's through the budget process, the expenses are itemized, the same as our budget under the contract and all of that. So it's all, it's done through the budget process, if that's, I'm not sure if that's what you were wondering. but-
No, what I was getting at was if they were subject to the full price that Morris Turnberry's charging them, then it's not our collective problem. If they're mad about the rates, they're gonna be mad about the rates from the people they're getting the water from, not North Huron, or that are being subsidized. I mean, I'm just saying, the people that are charging them more money should be the ones that are getting the flack, not us. We're trying to do the best we can, but I mean, if they have a problem, if they have a problem with what they're getting charged, it should be with the people that are charging them,
So let,
not
go
us.
ahead, Jeff.
But we're charging them.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm a Belgrave ratepayer, I get my bill from North Huron. I don't get my bill from Morris Turnberry. Morris Turnberry bills the municipality, and then the municipality goes around and turns around and bills them. What we've been doing is, Morris Turnberry's been billing us 1,000. Let's just use it for one example. One household's been charged $1,000. We're only charging that household 400 or 600. 600. So if the rates go up, the conversation with Belgrave is not that we're increasing your rate, if that's but we're increasing your rate complementary to the increase that are the costs that actually we're being billed for it. That's the issue. It's not, that's what's gonna happen.
So Donna, I wanna ask the question, here we go again, why is my staff taking the time to bill water that somebody else is supplying? Why is the supplier billing the customer direct?
Because it's the same that we do for their customers. We bill Morris Turnberry, and then they go out and collect the bills, and where it boils down to a collection problem. You don't normally have a problem, but when you're billing outside, they're not your resident. And so if they were your resident, then you could either put it on their taxes or whatever.
I understand.
But when you're crossing borders like that, you can't do that.
So let's see if we can bring this to some kind of end. So what do we want to do here? So are we going to continue to subsidize? Are we going to look at asking a little more, some more? Or why don't we direct the staff to come up with what Trevor said, a plan to bring it up?
I guess one question I would ask the council is, point one, is the entire municipality going to are we gonna be one system? or are we gonna look at Belgrave's system as its own system? Because as soon as we make that decision, the rest happens. If we make the decision that we're gonna treat Belgrave, North Huron residents in Belgrave on their system, the decision has to be made on how we're gonna charge them.
Just before I go to you, Anita, I wanna ask Donna something. What does an average person in Wingham pay per year for water? Like, I don't look at my bills, I can't tell you. I can't call Honey, she's in the meeting too.
So, a bill that we have right here, so a 2-month,
$80.39 a month.
yeah, $80.39 a month. Or this one here is
Right.
like $175 every 2 months.
So that's $2,000.
So that's $2,000 and how much?
175 times 6.
Oh, sorry, so that's 600, 1,000, 1,200, what is it? Sorry, I'll be quiet for this, let you figure it out.
1050-ish.
Yeah, so an average person's paying $10.50 in Wingham, and what are, when we subsidize, what does the person in Belgrade pay, 600? 600, so they're 400 lower than the very people you're talking about that you wanna be equal to, so they gotta come up at least 400 to be equal to what we are.
And that's what my recommendation is not being as painful as that.
Yep.
I'm saying over the next 4 years, or over the next 5 years, by the time we hit the 5th year, they should be paying identical to what we're paying.
There's the motion.
Not what you're paying,
Well, not what I'm paying, but up,
On an average.
on the same level.
Okay. Carson, can you somehow put that into a motion? Thank you, who's the motion second?
So that the
Oh,
council,
sorry, just second.
Well, I think Councilor Palmer.
Sorry.
We really need everyone to realize it's just water. Like, if this person, 175 times 6, that's, okay, 1,050 for water sewer. In Belgrade, it's 1050 water, and we have septic tanks. So we're paying a heck of a lot more just for the water part. So, the folks on the East Wanash side for $600 for water only. But still, you know, I like to see things the same, so, you know, I'm jumping out of the boat here, but when we're on the other side, on the foreign side, having to pay, you know, $1,000, it just seems to me everyone should be paying. Now, keep in mind too, they've got plans for a heck of a lot more houses on the Morris side, so hopefully that will bring the price down, whether it ever will or not, but anyhow.
All you're running into problems if you're going to look at Belgrave as a separate water system and you look at Blythe and Wingham. If you look at the capital we're putting away, is that something we wanna do or not? Say
I
treat
don't
the
see it
Blythe
as,
system.
I don't see it as looking at it as separate, I see as getting it closer to the, we're all together now, because Belgrade, believe it or not, without using our water system is cheaper than Blythe or Wingham. So all I'm suggesting is we bring that price up to where it should be, which is $1,000.
Well, just what Chris is saying, they're paying the same price as in Blythe. Right, and they don't have the sewer.
No, they're only paying 600.
They're paying 6 for water, well, essentially 6 for water, but it doesn't matter, because that's, the bill is 1,000 for both here, so it's still the same.
Is it both on or just water for 1,000?
We're already separate, like,
Yeah, in Wingham, like a water and sewer bill would be about $1,050. But in Belgrade, if we charged whatever for just water, the water would be over $1,000 just for water. And that's simply, again, because of the small number of users that there is to pay just for that water.
So can I make a suggestion, we throw this back to the staff as far as the Belgrade, if we have time, and you guys can sort this out and maybe come back with a little more clarification, because all of a sudden we went from water to sewer, water, back to water. I think we've been on this horse long enough tonight. I think we're all getting tired and losing track.
The one thing that Don pointed out though is the decision on rates does need to be made though, so that everything can line up to the fees and charges if we pass by the end of December.
Okay.
But the question is that the Belgrade discussion has nothing to do with our rates and
No.
fees.
Right.
We don't get any of it.
Has nothing to do with our rates and fees.
Yeah.
It's, Morris Turnberry is gonna bill us whatever they're gonna bill us, based on their rates and fees discussion. And I agree, if the council needs to get a more clearer understanding of how this is gonna work and how it all should be fair and equitable, I think we should have a further discussion. I'm fine with that. It's just that at some point, we need to come to a realization about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna make and maintain it.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, do we have any indication as to whether those fees that are being charged to Belgrade are correct?
Sorry, what do you mean by that? They're being charged the same flat monthly rate that Blythe is being charged.
No, but I meant that Morris Turnberry is charging all the residents. Could be an inflated charge to add, to build that twice over. I don't know. Is there,
Yeah, I think
Are they
Dwayne has
correct?
been,
That's-
yeah,
that-
Dwayne has been
you know.
meeting with their CAO and was asking for a copy of their budget so that you could see all that clearly up there, how they came up with it, just the same as our budget's available.
It's the same discussion for Morris Turnberry could ask us the same question.
yeah, exactly. But, I'm just saying,
Absolutely.
I don't know if that
It's all based
that's
on the
correct. I don't
budget,
know- I don't know if they've got the 15% in for, like what happens to our or the residents on our side. If their system fails, are they gonna be charged, $5,000 to fix it when they're already, when the fixing costs? I just hear us putting sewers out, I mean, are they getting that for all their water fixed and
Yeah.
forever, or
Is
are
there
they gonna have
add-ons?
to pay for it?
Yep, is there add-ons for infrastructure? Okay,
So,
go ahead, Don.
sorry, so we have the motion on the rates for, that was step one. So to provide you clarification, which we can move forward now on that piece. So the whole Belgrave piece, I think Trevor, you've summed it up perfectly. I've explained it as best I can on that. What other information can I bring to you that would make it any clearer to you what you need to decide?
Well, unfortunately, it became a twofold conversation here, because the first one and the main one, and the one I can't get away from, is the fact that we're subsidizing again for Morris Turnberry by taking taxpayers money from North Huron to pay for it. But as Trevor said, it's not like that because we have the three systems together. So that now we're looking at it a little different. We're not looking at it as three individual, even though we're still subsidizing, and it may not be the right word, Trevor. But now, when you look at it from that angle, which is councillors, we all look at each other's ideas, and that's how we come up with a formula. My concern is, are we treating them, would we be treating Belgrade poorly? I don't think so, because again, I'm gonna keep going back to, we didn't set the rate to begin with. But anyway, so where do you wanna go with this, guys?
If you're doing that,
Yeah, go ahead.
doing that, then the subsidized should be put through the entire system, not just one system. You're talking about, you got three systems, now you say, well, they're treated as one system, well, then it should just be an individual rate, no matter where you're.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. That's what's happened is that's where we got to now, because that's what we did. So
So let's go back to what Trevor suggested right now. Do you still have that on the table, Trevor?
So what I'm gonna suggest we defer it. My motion is to defer the discussion.
Okay.
Council, or Deputy Reeve Site will bring back a PowerPoint thing that shows exactly what I'm suggesting, and then council can have a more definitive discussion about what that looks like.
Okay.
Because that's what, I have it in my head what it looks like. I don't think councilors all understand what I'm saying. So, and I may, after I go back and do the math and think about it, my math could be wrong. So I will do that, based on my information, and I'll have some discussion with Donna, is to make sure that we're all lined up. But by the next meeting on the 18th, I will bring back that discussion for the Belgrave system.
So, we have a motion to defer. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. All in favor? Carries.
So the last thing I think Dawn needs is the term.
Donna, more.
So, just that we recommended, in the slideshow that we had, was that they had recommended a 10-year term, and I'm recommending 5, because, I think this is something that needs to be more discussed oftener. And so I think that, it would be prudent to review these rates after 5 years, rather than committing ourselves to 10.
Bailey, I will move that.
We have a mover. Do I have a seconder? I have Kevin. All in favor? Carries. Thank you.
Great.
Somebody else like that.
The user water.
7.3.1, application for the Canadian Investment and Infrastructure Program. Vicki, would you like to speak to that first?
Thank you, Your Worship. As indicated in my previous report to council, the federal government has announced the next funding stream for investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and that it will focus on community, culture, and recreation infrastructure projects. Funding is available for new construction as well as rehabilitation and or renovation projects. In order for projects to be considered, they need to include a capital component and meet the federal and provincial objectives, which include increasing access to programs or facilities, addressing AODA requirements, improve energy efficiency, address gaps in the community. Over the past few weeks, staff have been reviewing the township's asset management plan, the list of future capital projects that we have planned, and going over the results of the facility accessibility audit, but that was recently conducted by the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee. Based on the information that's been gathered from all of those areas, we've put together a rehabilitation project for the North Huron West Cast Community Complex. The project would include the replacement of the Aquatic Center Dectron unit, replacement of a portion of the roof, address some of the humidity control issues that we're experiencing that's creating a lot of condensation, and implementing or retrofitting lighting to make the facility more efficient, as well as address a number of the accessibility areas that were identified in the report. We've also been in contact with the Knights of Columbus, who operate the Knights of Columbus Center. They've expressed an interest in supporting our application and have asked for assistance as well, and would like to be part of that application, improving their sound issues and lighting over there as well. So we have asked them for a letter of support. They've also made they're willing to make a financial commitment to pay, if the project's approved, to pay for their portion, their 26.67% of the funding requirement. We've also asked for a letter of support from Morris Turnberry because of the number of users they have using the facility and their contributions that's made toward the operation of the facility on an annual basis. Currently, the township does have approximately $200,000 in the reserves. That money was earmarked for addressing the roofing issues and some pool renovations. We could use that funding to promote the township's portion of the application. So what we've done is we've put together a list of a variety of components to make this project very appealing for funding from the feds in the province. And hopefully, we can be able to entice them. As indicated previously, it is going to be a highly competitive application process. I think originally I had reported that they were looking at a second intake in 2021, 2022. They have now indicated that that intake will not be for recreation. So this is our one-time shot at getting the funding. So, Don and I have both been in, had discussions with other municipalities around, it seems like everyone is applying for this funding. So, the list that I provided, council, we do not have to apply for all of these things, but we could take the chance and apply for it and see if, we're able to get, the funding for it. The thing to keep in mind is that, all of these projects are on the horizon in the next 10 years. And if we are successful, we could get 74% of the costs, and which would be a cost savings for the taxpayers in the long run.
Thank you, Becky. So I'm gonna read the motion. The Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive a report from the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated November 4, 2019 for information. And further, that the council authorizes staff to prepare and submit an application to the Canada Investing in Infrastructure Program, Community Culture and Recreation Funding Stream for renovations to the North Huron West Cass Community Complex. Do I have a mover? I have Chris. I have Paul second. Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
The 26, get it through here, the 26.67%, through the Knights of Columbus share, what's that based on? The 26 point?
It's through,
Yeah, but it's benefiting Knights of Columbus Hall. I'm just wondering why wouldn't it be a 50-50 split rather than a 26.20?
through your
Go ahead.
worship. That is the funding formula from the province and the feds. So of the overall project, it's 26.67% has to come from the municipality or the nonprofit organization that's involved in the application.
Second,
Go ahead.
So the Knights, through your
Yeah.
worship, so the Knights of Columbus Hall, they have the last two items listed there, so that would be
66, for $90,000 worth of stuff
Mhm.
for their share of 24,003.
So their 26.67% would be the 24,000. Their share of those costs, that specific part of the application, if successful in that area, it would be $24,000.
Don't they generate 100% of profits from that hall? So I'm getting, like, they're getting, you know, like, the towns, they're getting the same percentage as the municipality would in the process, just by joining on. And then it's really, it's organized, but you know, I don't see anything in here from the Lions Club or.
So Kevin, what you're suggesting is they should be applying by themselves, like?
No, well, I'm just getting,
Because they
it
are
would be different.
nonprofit.
yeah, it'd be different if it was our entity, but it's a separate entity.
Yeah.
I just don't see why any other search wouldn't be getting a 26% to get in as well.
I'm
Your
gonna let Becky
worship?
answer that.
The application is for the owner of the premises, the owner of the facility. They cannot apply for this on their own. They do not own the facility. We own the facility.
Do we need the energy lights and the sound system in there as a municipality?
They've actually, through your worship, they've actually been discussing this with us, because of if you recall, their budget we do pay the electricity, and then we recoup costs from them, through the lease fees and things to cover some of those costs and things. So it would make things more energy efficient and thus, reflect in their budgets.
I understand the point.
So I'm just gonna throw it out to other counselors if they wanna have question the same thing, Kevin. Is there anybody else questioning why this is taking place? Okay,
Second question, I
Yeah,
noticed
go
that
ahead.
it's for recreation and recreation won't be allowed the next intake. I see nothing on here for any considerations for Blythe. They could use soundproofing, it's noisy upstairs in their hall. They've just gone through some energy efficient lighting that I don't think they've done upstairs yet. But I just wondered, there's nothing in here let's stick with the one building.
Through you, your worship. So the Blythe facility had received improvements back around 2002, I believe it was, about 20 years ago. I guess my math's off a little bit on that. And things where they made a lot of improvements to that facility with some funding from the government. In discussions with staff, we were looking at, the main reason we went with the West Crest facility was because of the large capital, the improvements or replacement costs of these large capital items. So, when you're looking at the Dectron unit costing, and this is an actual cost that we're gonna be faced with in the next 5 years, $250,000. We have the roofing issue where we have, leaks and condensation issues there. That's another $335,000. So, when we looked at the overall cost of what those large pieces were gonna be, we thought this was our best bet in trying to put forth this application and get funding. There is a project on the books for the roof and Blythe, and, but it's not as substantial. So we're trying to get as much funding in to help offset these larger expenses that are coming down the tubes. With respect to the accessibility audit that was just conducted in Blythe as well, they did not come back with as many issues as the North Huron facility did. There was a lot of issues with the North Huron facility not meeting accessibility requirements. In terms of energy efficiency, we could look at that, but it's really up to council. I believe we do have some numbers for energy efficiency lighting. Through Public Works, there was some quotations that were provided from a supplier. And I believe the Blythe Community Center was one of the ones that was looked at. We were just trying to look at the best way to get the money in to offset those larger expenses and things. We can take energy efficient lighting off there if that makes any sense, but we're just really trying to make this application more attractive and so that we actually make it to the next round because.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. So I'm gonna say something right now. So on 2 days' notice, I was asked if I could go to Toronto on behalf of the Blythe Theatre for $15 million, and I did. I was given 20 minutes notice about meeting another minister that would help us with that, set up by Lisa Thompson, and I have no problem with that. I didn't come back and say to anybody, Wingham's not getting this. I'm getting a little concerned that we're going off track here. I do understand where you're coming from, Kevin. We're going to have another meeting with those people. And never once did I have anybody from the theater here in Wingham upset. They may see me still, but this is about the Blythe Theater and what a great job, and I'm 100% behind it. I do understand where you're coming from as far as the nights are not part of our, let's call it concern. But I think Vicky's trying to relay that it's the building that we own that is our concern. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not a one-sided, we keep going back to the Blythe Arena. This is not a one-sided affair. I was given 2 days' notice, and I made that commitment. And I know a person sitting right beside me that stepped off that bus 8:30 that night and had to still go home and still got up and went to work 8:30 the next morning because we had a meeting here the next morning. I have 2 more commitments to, I believe one's on the 7th, and I don't know when the next one is. I will be there for everyone, and I think we should all be there for everyone. I do understand where you're going with, they're not, the nights are not part of our commitment to the community, but the building is, okay? If other counselors would like to speak up, and if they have concerns with this, now is the time to speak up, okay? Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not on purposely pulling out just that one entity as I mentioned a moment ago. It's the process of the acquisition of what needs to be done. One meeting prior to this, we found out that they need to, the hall in Blythe is not generating funds enough and needs to be repurposed. Fine. But repurposing a squash court to a basketball court and putting money in there to do that without addressing a problem that's already been brought up, to me, it is short-sighted. I just don't, I don't see.
No, it's okay, and I understand.
I'll leave it at that.
No,
So
no.
it's not me picking one part apart, and yes, the theater has gotten a great, a deal of funding through here, but I'm just taking on things from one meeting to the next, and last meeting, we were, everything was fine in the arena, in Wingham, but Blythe needed some changes.
Yeah.
Just don't see it now when we're applying for funding, any changes for, so
You-
5 years down the road, when there's no funding left, we're out of luck.
And you're totally justified in that. So Vicky, can we look at doing away with the basketball thing and?
I'm not picking anything apart here, I'm just
No,
choosing, just seeing what is relevant and what isn't relevant in the last couple of meetings that we've had.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So, if,
I
what's
understand.
your timing on this? When do you have to have this in?
Next Tuesday.
Through you, your worship,
Yeah.
though, just in touching on what you spoke of too, is when looking at this, we were also aware of the application being submitted by the festival, and we certainly didn't want to compete with the festival either, and things, so that, that's something to keep in mind. As indicated in the report, all of these components do not need to be submitted. They don't have to be submitted. If council wishes to remove anything from there, that's fine. I just would hope, from a staffing perspective and what we're looking at long-term here, down the road here in the next 5 years, that the large components be left in there. Because those are the ones that is going to have a substantial financial impact on us. So those first three, the Decatron, the roof, and the dealing with that humidity issue, those are the ones we really, really want. The others, there's flexibility in them, but they will be coming forward. They will be coming forward in the next 5 years, so. And again, if there's something in there that you wish to remove, there's no issues with that.
So with this funding, Donna, do we have a certain time on a time to use it up? If it was at a 1 year, you gotta use it or they get it back or anything like that?
On behalf, through you, your worship, it's 2027.
Okay. So, go ahead. Yes.
Through you, Reeve, just wondering, are you stuck with, wrong word, but with those items, like, you got to 27 to spend the money, do they do inventory on that, make sure, audit
Yeah.
each item, and you either did it or you didn't? Okay.
Okay, so since we have till 27, I'm gonna go back over to Kevin, I'm gonna go back over to the room that's not making enough money. Should we not be putting something in there that we could get money towards revamping that for something? And I know we have a short timeline here.
Sorry, through you, or,
Yep.
sorry, your worship, revamping the,
The blue room at the Blythe Arena.
No, it's community hall upstairs, it's a conversation.
Okay, community hall at the,
No, it's just any project, I just didn't see, talking about one building, and just letting the other one not on the list.
yeah. So was there anything that was on the back burner for that? Because you did speak of it wasn't making money. Do you have anything on the back burner where you could put in this too?
Just some things,
through your worship, I think we would almost be talking a separate application, which we could do, but I would have to get those costs together very quickly. We would have to know what it is that you want to do.
Okay.
Okay, we need some kind of idea as to what you want to do. In terms of signage, yes, we could apply for something for signage. They have, we could come up with some costs on some accessibility hardware for doors down there. We could certainly do that. I know that with the accessibility committee, one of the big issues with that facility was the elevator. The access to that elevator, it's more of a lift than a true elevator. So there's operational issues with that, and if having to use a key and all those things, but the problem is the space.
Okay.
So
so it's very limited space, so that's why they put in that type of, lift.
So let's do this. Let's pass this one and let's get together here and figure out what we can do with the Blythe, and let's get another application off, and let's see what we can do. Because it's all pie in the sky anyway until we actually see the money, so I'm good with that if the rest of council's good with that. I'm gonna go for Trevor first, then Paul.
But the problem with that discussion, Reeve, is the application needs to be in by Tuesday. So unless you're gonna make this meeting until midnight, we have to decide on what you're gonna put in that to put the application. You can't just say repurpose the community hall. You gotta give a reason for it and the purpose. So my question or my concern is we're gonna be doing come hell or high water, in my belief, is I'm going to be pushing astronomically hard to get a master plan together for recreation. So that when a grant comes down the pipe in 2021 or 20 or whatever, that this discussion is a moot point. Here's what we need, here's what we have, here's where the money should go. If council wants to decide to alter that plan, then they need to alter that plan. But the master services plan will give us, master recreation plan will give us what we need. And what we need for the next 25 years, or 50 years, or whatever the heck it is. We cannot make that, we're not going to be making that decision tonight. I don't think anybody here has any idea what we want to do for that space. And we have no plan in place to do it, and I think it's irresponsible for us to push that back on
Thank
staff.
you, Trevor. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
How many things can we send in under North Huron's name where they'll say, again, are they asking? Again, are they asking? I think what Vicky said earlier on, we're going for the best, they'll do the most good.
Okay.
Just my,
Kevin?
I'm just to trying to get my point across on this whole thing. If we were going into this, I agree with Deputy Reeve site on the master being master plan of that. But it's a perception thing for me. If we were to put this kind of a budget, $939,000, a grant, into one facility, say Blythe, and not Wayne, that facility would be first class. You know, that's almost replacing every mechanical piece in it. It's, in my perception, this is all going into one building, and now we're gonna have a discussion over which one's in better shape. Which one costs, you know, these processes are being made before that decision. So it's going to, in my mind, in my vision, that puts my representation of my constituents in a lesser point, because that's $1 million we're not gonna get that we could have used to put us into better shape when this whole thing was served.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm getting at, is when I see something that doesn't include my constituents in something that's this broad, without the master plan. We may not, I know we're overstimulated with the services that we do. I'm not just reading it in one bit, but I'm just saying, I don't want to see the scenario of one place is getting set up for success and another one is not.
And I understand that, and I think, so I think what I'm hearing, and I think the way we should go is with the motion as presented, understanding we're gonna do the master plan, and clearly understanding that we're all in this together, and that we'll be working on that project too. This is, I see it a little different than you. I don't see it the way you do where, and I understand you're representing Blythe, but I just see we're working on this project, and I'm working on the other project, and I'm working on this project, and I've got a lot of them on the go, but never are they all one community. You know what I mean?
Tomorrow, it showed up in Blythe, $800,000 worth of renovations to be closed tomorrow. Because we just couldn't afford it.
Yeah. So we're all working together. It's just that this has come up. So I think we're all good and we understand each other. Okay, thank you very kindly. Okay, did I read that motion yet?
Yeah.
Okay, did I have a seconder? Yeah, I did? I call the vote, all in favor? Carries. Thank you. Keep track of it. Thank you, Vicky. 7.3.2, is it still on the agenda? Oh, that's right. Okay, we're gonna go to 7.3.2. Vicky, you're on the hot seat again. And I'll let you speak to this and then I'll read the motion.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. This report is a follow-up to Council's direction on October 7th regarding the RFP submissions for the operation of concession booths at the Blythe District Community Center and the North Huron West Cass facility. Council had selected 2 proponents for staff to contact to discuss terms, conditions, and negotiate an equitable compensation for the use of the booths. Discussions were held with the selected proponents, out of which an agreement has been reached for the operation of the booth in Blythe. The successful proponent is the Blythe United Church. The church has agreed to a 1-year agreement for the operation of the booth. The church will be operating the booth with volunteers during hockey and broomball tournaments as well as special events. Proceeds from the booth will go back into the community. As mentioned in the report, the operation of the booth will result in increased operational expenses for the facility. However, it's anticipated that those costs would be covered off by revenue from the lease of the facility. In order to ensure that the booth is operational before the first date the Silver Stick Tournament is in Blythe, which is November 16th, staff have requested an exemption to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw, which would allow the execution adopted prior to the next council meeting. As indicated in the report, execution of the document was to be subject to the solicitor's review. Late this afternoon, staff did receive the solicitor's comments. The solicitor requested some minor word changes to the agreement, none of which changed the intent. A copy of the amended agreement was provided on your desks this evening prior to the start of the meeting. And as such, the motion of the report has been amended to allow the agreement to be executed by bylaw.
So I'm gonna read the motion that the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated November 4th, 2019 for information purposes. And further that the council authorizes the reading clerk to sign bylaw 107-2019, being a bylaw to execute an agreement between the Township of North Huron and the Blythe United Church for lease of the concession booth at the Blythe District Community Center for 1 year. And further that the council approves the recommended changes to the agreement as provided by the township's solicitor. And further that the council deems the executing of this agreement to be a time-sensitive matter and grants the exception to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 107-2019 to be adopted by the council at the November 4th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Rick. Do I have a seconder? I have Trevor. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Okay, 7.4.1. Sean, this is for you, the OPS 2019-49 winter control for unassumed roadway in Blythe. Would you like to speak to it first?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
You're welcome.
So, as council's aware, construction of the Rutledge subdivision has progressed to the extent that it's basically functioning with roads throughout. There's a lot of activity, building, construction. There's actually residents living in the development now. Township was approached by the developer, at which time we were asked if his subdivision could be added to our winter control program. I had a discussion with BM Ross regarding this because it seemed like an unusual request, only to find out that this is actually a very common practice for developers. Even though the township has not assumed the road, we're inevitably going to assume it, so the municipality can enter into an agreement for winter control services. I did talk to some neighboring municipalities that practice this, and nobody had any, or the one I talked to didn't have any concerns. It's a very straightforward practice. If council approves this practice, of course it would require a contractual agreement between the developer and the township to ensure that we had proper indemnification and protection throughout the course of the winter control season. This would be looking at basically the day after the next council meeting through to April 15th, which is our winter control season. And what we're talking about here would be simple snow plowing, salting and sanding. It's not snow removal or anything beyond that. It wouldn't be stormwater management in the spring. Any of those extra services would be time and material. In discussion with the developer, that we proposed a fixed fee to him of $5,000 for the term of the season, if it was something that was approved by council. And he was agreeable to that after some consideration. And the only other thing I think to add is that before we would enter into an agreement, which council would see at the next regular meeting of council, that agreement would be vetted by legal counsel, so that we knew that nothing was wrong with this.
Thank you. So I'm gonna read the motion and we'll have a conversation. That the council of the township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the Director of Public Works dated November 4th, 2019 regarding winter control services for the Rutledge subdivision for information. And further, the staff be directed to prepare an agreement with GJAJ Holdings Limited for the provision of winter control services for a period of November 19th, 2019 to April 15th, 2020. And further, that the agreement be forwarded to the township solicitor for review. And further, the staff be directed to prepare a bylaw authorizing the signing of this agreement for council's consideration at the November 18th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor, and I have Paul seconding. Questions or concerns? Go ahead, Trevor.
Through you, Reed. Sean, I know it says 380 meters. Is that the complete around all the way from like where it's being developed, where it's currently been developed, all the way around to back to Queen? Or is it just the one where the development actually is?
That would be all of Gloria and all of Rutledge. So
Okay.
basically, we were doing north anyways.
Yes.
This would just be, we would pick up those two streets, come back out on Queen and on.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve, Sean, at what point does the municipality assume the roads? The new road?
Barring, through you, your worship,
Yeah.
barring unforeseen circumstances after final acceptance, which I believe in this case is after 2 years of operations.
So is there a chance of getting what we're asking for renewed? Like this is for a 1 year?
Through your
Yep.
worship, that would be the intent. I didn't want to go into a long drawn out. If we have a successful winter and he still wants the service next year, we would revisit this. I would bring this to council again.
Go ahead, Ken.
Through you. On site inspection there, they only have the first road capping of asphalt in there. Does that pose a problem? Are the sewer grates and everything at level enough that it wouldn't interfere with the plowing?
We check that. Everything's at appropriate grade for the first lift, yes.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. We have no fire department, no building department, no child care department, and the CO has no reports. So we're gonna go to 8.1, investing in candidate infrastructure, ICIP Green Stream application intake. Sean, do you want to talk to that first?
Certainly. So there's, this ICIP grant has been released. I believe it's, the submission is required January 22nd. Is that correct? Okay. It wonderfully aligns with our standpipe project. So as soon as we saw it, I believe there were some high fives. And we wanted to present this to council and at the same time ask permission to apply for the standpipe project under the grant program.
Okay, now I'll just read the motion that the Council Township of North Huron hereby authorizes staff to prepare and submit a grant application for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan, ICIP Green Street intake for the Wingham standpipe. Do I have a mover? I have Chris and I have Paul seconding. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Council's reports. The Reeves activity report. We had a bitty, I actually remembered the right one out this time, I forgot last time we were here. So October 22nd, I was part of a delegation with Dwayne, Gill, Jennifer, and Toronto to meet with the Minister Scott for funding on a new project for the Blythe Theatre. It was a follow-up meeting from information from funding that a delegation that myself, Dwayne, Rick, and Paul were at in Ottawa. While we were at this meeting just last week, we were invited to a second meeting, and we met with, believe it or not, Michael Sparling, who has a father called Stephen Sparling that has nothing to do with the Sparlings in Blythe. How unique is that? But anyway, we had a second follow-up with him, and he represented Lisa McLeod, I think that is, for culture. So very good meetings, and we're hoping something comes of that because there's great things going on in Blythe. On 25th, we did our first budget review, or another budget review. On the 28th, we had media and emergency training over in Clinton for those that showed up, and it was the same gentleman that was here tonight presented to us in the afternoon. I think it was quite a thing to be part of and see how you should handle things, which was totally the opposite of the way I do it, apparently. On the 29th, we were involved in the 4th Industrial Labor Shortage meeting here in North Huron. Some of our formulas are working. We're still working hard on it. We do have a great situation here in North Huron, and the staff, myself, and the industry folks are working together very well on it. We had the town hall meeting in Blythe, which was a lot of fun the other night, and I think we answered a few questions. On Friday, I attended the Ontario Data Strategy Roundtable, and it was in Stratford. Another one I was given 2 days notice on, but I'm glad I went. It was you know me, I didn't probably talk too much, but a lot of the other people seem to have the same concerns I did. And I'm glad I went. There's only going to be 4 of them in all of Ontario, so North Huron was represented at one of them. And the upper tier government will be making a decision on what we said, what we talked about. Lisa Thompson, she showed up at, when we were doing the Blythe Theatre. I just want to mention that when we did the presentation to Minister Scott, Lisa Thompson showed up, and she not just sat there, she was very good. She spoke out, she helped us, she pointed things out. I was very pleased with that because quite often upper tier you don't get a lot of help. So I truly commend her for being there, and she had to rush off 3/4 of the way through it because she was missing a meeting to be there for us. That's it for me. Other councillors, would you like to speak about what you've been doing or what's been going on? Anyone? Go ahead.
This is regarding volunteerism. I think it was Saturday night in Belgrade, there was a fish fry, and it was to raise funds for the Belgrade Marina committee there. And one man, so there's quite a few people, I can't give you how many, 200-ish. One man donated all the fish. And another one, I think, was all the spuds. And there was a lot of people there helping, like the school fair people were all there doing that. Actually, maybe that's what money was going to, school fair, sorry, school fair. But lots of volunteers all around, and it was really good. And I know volunteerism happens in Wingham and Blythe, and it's just so nice, so refreshing out here in the rural.
Yeah, I think that was Saturday.
And Lisa was there too.
Yeah, I think that was Saturday night because we helped set up, and then I had a 50th wedding, or 50th birthday in Hanover to go to. So yes, it's fantastic the way Belgrade pulls together. Anything else? Anybody? Go ahead, Paul.
Just this group in town, they're voted into the Ontario Hall of Fame, and it's always been individuals getting it. It's whoever best exemplifies work that goes on in the community, and you all know Daryl Settler, maybe some of you younger people won't, but he is in it once. Elmira, he involved a lot. And one that won it last year was somebody called Hazel McCallion. I think Hurricane Hazel, we might know her by. She won it last year, but the thing about it this year is the first time ever an organization has won it, and it was the WA office in town here, and they had people. I know there's a house and gentleman from Blythe. I wrote down some. Dave Black, a bunch of the people in town here will know him. He used to be a building inspector here. He was past president, and then there was Grant Curry. Mike Mauvais, and who's the other one in town? Al Dixon is the current president. So I thought it was really something to see that a group won it over an individual over the last X number of years, so. And it started in town here back in 1942 by Mr. Cruikshank. So it just helped teams get to be able to play against other teams where that was unheard of years before, eh? So that was really good. And also just like comment, just as Lorraine down here in the main street had lanterns a week ago Friday in town here, and it's a real good turnout of kids through the night there. So it was really good. Again, as you're saying, volunteerism is really good.
Thank you, Paul. Trev?
I just wanted to, I went to, it was last Friday, I participated in the Huron County Agriculture annual meeting, Federation of Agriculture annual meeting. It was actually a full house. Lisa Thompson was there, but it was interesting. The guest speaker that night was just very interesting in the sense that he was a person from the area who went to a place in Africa. I can't even remember the community, but they went to a place in Africa to teach education about farming to one of the poorest country or places in Africa, to show them how to grow corn. So now they didn't call it corn, but that's what I see as a non-farmer. I see it as corn. So it was an interesting night. It was very interesting just to see the. From my perspective, it was very interesting in the sense of seeing the demographic of the farmers today, knowing what you hear but always don't see what they are. There wasn't a lot, now again, there wasn't a lot of people my age at this particular event, but I don't know that that's a true testament of who's actually working on the farm. But it was interesting to see everybody came and enjoyed some fellowship and just interesting and get to know just some people there, some other counselors and Bruce McClellan was there and Glenn McNeil from other municipalities. So it was a great night overall, I think. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Trevor. Anyone else? Seeing none. Comments from members? Not seeing any. Notice of motion. I have none on here, so I'm going to presume that means none. So let's go to the bylaws. Bylaw 11.1, being a bylaw to adopt the Occupational Health and Safety Policy Statement and Joint Health and Safety Committee Terms of Reference. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw 104.19, being a bylaw authorizing agreement for fire suppression services with the Township of Ashfield, Colburn, Wawanosh. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 105/2019, being a bylaw authorizing a site plan agreement with Rutling Holdings Limited. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, I have Rick. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 106/2019, being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with 2665291 Ontario Inc. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Rick. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 107/2019, being a bylaw to authorize agreement between the Blythe United Church. Do I have a mover? I have Chris and I have Kevin. All in favor? Carries. Announcements. The public consultation for strategic planning meeting will be held on Thursday, November 7th, 2019 from 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. at the Belgrade Community Center Hall. If you're unable to attend this meeting, a survey will also be available to the public to provide their input from November 8th until November 24th at the Town Hall's website, Township's website. The next North Huron Economic Development Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, November 14th from 8 a.m. at the Blythe Community Center. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, November 18th, 2019, 6 p.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. The next North Huron Police Services Board meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. here at the Chambers. The next House and Dam Bridge Dam Committee will be held on Wednesday, November 20th at 4 p.m. here at the Chambers. The next North Huron Museum Committee will be held on Thursday, November 24th, and again here at the Chambers. Other business? Seeing none. There is no closed session, so confirmatory bylaw. Bylaw number 208-2019 being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to confirm on November 4th, 2019 actions of the Council Township of North Huron. And that the bylaw 208-2019 being a bylaw to confirm November 4th, 2019 actions of the Township of North Huron be introduced, read a first, second, and final time, signed by the reeve and clerk and engrossed in the bylaw books. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Chris. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council of the Township of North Huron agrees that there being no further business before council and the meeting hereby adjourned at 9:10 p.m. Do I have a mover? I have Rick and I have Paul, all in favor, and that's all she wrote.